Hey, have you ever wanted to make beats but didn't know where to start? Well, start here. Today, I'm going to go over the basics on what you need, the basics on how to make music, and then we will make some beats so you can see how everything comes together. I'm going to make everything super simple, and here's a table of contents so you can review later. And feel free to check out my beat tapes for reference. With that being said, let's get started. Now, assuming that you have a computer, the first thing you need is a music program. Most music programs usually have a free trial, so you can try some of them before you buy one of them. I would definitely give them each a try and try to find the one that best fits you, and there are also some free ones to help you get started. And while there's many great programs for beats, such as FL Studio and Logic, today I will show you my program of choice, Ableton. But don't worry, regardless of whatever program you choose, the techniques I will show you today can be applied in other programs too. In your music program, there will usually be a search bar for you to find your sounds. For our lesson, we'll use two types of sounds, instruments and samples. Let's start with instruments. Instruments are things like synths, those retro keyboards with sounds from the 80s that you might hear in video games and EDM. Bass, with those fat, lower sounds that make the song move and groove. Pianos, with those clean, reflective notes and keys. And strings, those pretty high sounds used in everything from classical music to R&B and soul. The other type of sound we'll use is samples, which is just little pieces of already recorded music. For example, here's a song. Let's take a small part of it, and now it's a sample. And we can use this sample in a new song. You can also take little bits of sounds, like drums being hit, people speaking,
I stay awake at night wondering.
or really anything you want that you can cut down, mix up, and reuse in a different way to make new music.
I stay awake at night wondering. I stay awake at night wondering. That's my answer.
Your program will have an instrument that will let you load and play samples.
I stay awake
And although
at night.
Ableton has two dedicated sample players called the Simpler and the Sampler,
stay awake at night.
I often prefer to use the drum rack.
I stay awake at night wondering. I stay awake at night wondering. That's my answer.
Now I'm going to teach you 4 elements of a beat. And while some beats could have less, and some beats can have more, I personally would recommend these 4. Drums. They are the foundation of a beat. These are the hard-hitting percussive sounds underneath the whole song. Here are the parts of the drums: the kick, the snare, the hi-hats, and the percussion. If you combine these in certain patterns, you get different types of songs. Here are some drum patterns from different styles of music. Feel free to use any of these to get your song started. Let's go ahead and make a drum beat real quick. We'll make a lo-fi beat to keep it simple. Let's choose some lo-fi sounds. And then here we'll put some basic kicks, then some snares, then hi-hats between the notes. And if you put sounds on a different rhythm between other sounds, this is called syncopation. And now let's add some kicks a little off here and there to give the beat some swing. And now we have a drum beat. Now that we have our drums, I'll teach you some music basics so we can add some sounds on top. We will start with chords. Now this is a keyboard. It has the same layout as a piano. All of these keys are notes. Here's the names of these notes for the white keys. And here's the names of the notes for the black keys. Every time that this group of notes repeats in a higher or lower register, that is called an octave. Here's a C in a lower octave. Here's a C in the next higher octave. Here's a C in the next higher octave after that. And here's a C in this lower octave over here. If you press 3 or more keys in certain patterns, or you press 3 or more keys together that just sound good, playing 3 or more notes together makes a chord. Let's start with an A note. Now let's go up 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then let's go up another 3 notes from there. 1, 2, 3. If you play these 3 notes together, that creates an A major. Major chords tend to sound happy and bright. Now, if you were to move this middle note down, and you play these together, that is called an A minor. Minor chords tend to sound sad and dark. There's so many different types of chords and chord shapes, but today we'll just cover major and minor chords. If you want to make a major chord, just think of this pattern. Find a note to start, then 4, then 3. For a minor, find a note to start, then 3, then 4. Whatever note you start with, let's say you start with an A, for example, that's usually the name that you'll start the chord with. Let's say you start with A, fill out the rest of the chord. That's an A major. Let's say a chord starts with D, fill out the rest of the chord. That's a D minor. Now I'm going to show you some chords. Just copy these shapes, and you can use those to get started. Let's see, here's a nice A major, C sharp minor, D major, E major, F minor, G sharp major, A sharp minor, C major. And here's a tip on what chords to play after each other. Let's do C major. So we'll start with the C, count out 1, 2, 3, 4 for the second note, count out 1, 2, 3 for the third note, C major. Now to have an idea of what chord we could play next, let's just start from the second note here and use the same pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3. And now we have E major. So we have C major, E major, C major, E major. The same pattern can be applied with minor chords too. Let's do a G minor. So 1, 1, 2, 3 for the second note, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a G minor. Let's start with the second note in this chord for the next chord. And then let's count 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. A sharp minor, G minor, A sharp minor, G minor, A sharp minor. When you play chords together in a certain order, that is called a chord progression. When you're playing these chords back and forth, that's a chord progression. Kind of like Motown here. Whatever sounds good to you, just play together. There are some rules of music, but they're more like a guideline rather than just something you always have to do every single time. And here's my very last tip for this section. When you get good enough to play these type of shapes with your right hand, A major, C sharp minor, E major, I would then try to practice with your left hand, hitting the same first note in a lower octave to make the chord sound fuller. Here's an example. We have an A major here. I'm going to try to find an A in a lower octave. You'll notice that this A is usually here between this set of the 3 black keys. So let's just try to find an A down here. Here we go. Let's play them all together. Now it's a much fuller sound. Here's another example to fill out your chords. Let's do an F major in this higher octave over here. First note, your F. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. Now you see this F here. This F starts at the beginning of this set of 3 black keys. So let's try to find another F in a lower octave. Here's an F. beginning of 3 black keys, another F. Use your right hand to play out the higher parts of the chord, or is known as a treble. Use your left hand to play the lower parts of the chord, which is the bass. And then if you want to really fill it out, go ahead and try this little exercise. Stretch your pinky and stretch out your thumb. Take this lower F here. Try to also hit it in the next lower octave with your pinky. When you learn how to do this, it'll make your chords sound a lot more full and dramatic. Now let's play that drum beat. I'll choose an electric piano to go with my lo-fi drum beat. And now let's play 2 chords back and forth. A melody is just notes played in a certain order and pattern. The easiest way to start a melody is to pick an instrument for your melody, copy your chords to this new melody instrument, and then move this chord up by 1 octave so that these notes stand out more. Now, here's 3 steps to make a melody. We'll start with this chord and chop it up evenly. Then we'll change which note is being played every so often. And after that, you can do more chops in different places and change the notes again. And last, you can start removing notes to give them more space and to help them stand out more. While you can stick with the notes from your chords, you can just try notes in other places too and see what sounds good to you. So now, let's talk about bass. These are the super low sounds that give rhythm and groove to your song. And just to let you know, right now, we'll go over regular bass, but later, I'll go over 808s. So let's go to your chords. Let's find the lowest note for each chord. And then we'll just use these same low notes for your bass. And they will just follow the chords. You can hold the bass notes. You can hit them evenly to keep the song moving along. You can hit a few notes here and there just to give the song a little spice. And to make a bass line, Just do what we learned with melodies. You can use the notes from your chords to guide us and chop those notes into different patterns. And here's a tip. Make sure to choose instruments that all fit each other and have the same vibes if you're trying to make a certain style of music. And now we have a lo-fi beat. Next, let's put together a sample type beat. Now, in my opinion, sampling is an art and should be respected, as it takes a lot of skill to make sample music. However, you do need legal permission to use samples before you release your music commercially. Thankfully, there are sites with legally cleared samples, like Splice.com and Tracklib. But if you use any other samples without getting the clearance first, then those samples you have to use at your own risk. All right, so today we're gonna make a sample-based beat. This entire song will be using only samples. Just like in the previous lesson, we're gonna have 4 elements of a song: the drums, the chords, the melody, and the bass. When it comes to sampling, there are 2 ways to cut samples. First, let me show you the old school way. The old school way is first you would get a sample. So this is a song. What you would do is you would kind of just scan through it a little bit, listen to the different parts of it until you got a part you wanted to sample. Say I like that mind right, so what I would do is I would just go to that part. Get your mind right. Right here. So I would see that that's where the beginning of that part I wanted to sample is, so I would just mainly cut that part out. Mind right. And now it's its own sample. I can just play this back on its own. Mind right. Mind right. Let's see, then we go back to the main song and try to find more samples that I wanted to hear, more samples that I wanted to possibly use, or sounds that I liked. That's good. So what I'll do is I'll just cut this part out too. And now I have another sample. And eventually what would happen is that you would go through the song and just kind of snip out the parts you liked. After doing this enough, you would find enough pieces of the song you would want to sample, and you think you'd have enough pieces to work with to come up with different sections or different parts of the song. This way has its advantages where it kind of forces you to really listen to the song, and you don't know what's always in the song, so you listen to the whole thing and you might find a part in the song that you didn't know was there that could give you some inspiration. The one trade-off is, though, is that because you're manually doing this, you will have to, kind of slowly go in, zoom in, chop, line up things, It's a little bit of work. It's totally cool, especially if you enjoy making sample music, but that's just a little bit more time consuming. So it just depends on your preference. So this was the old school way, doing it manually. But the new school way, or at least the more modern way, is you can use sample players to detect the chops for you and give you different options on how you want them chopped. So let's go ahead and do that now. We're gonna cut. We're going to bring this song out again real quick to help you visualize what I'm about to do. So you'll notice I have a blank MIDI track up here. Let's just drag this down for a second. Let's go ahead and search up one of Ableton's sample players. This is called a Simpler. So we'll go ahead, drag it onto the MIDI track. And now this MIDI track is now a Simpler. And what we can do with the Simpler is we can drag this song into the Simpler. So once you bring the song down here, you'll notice the song now exists in the Simpler. And there's 3 options on how we can play back and manipulate the sample. I will go through all 3 options in this lesson, but for now, let's go ahead and start with Slice. So we're gonna go past Classic, go past One Shot, and we'll go down to Slice. Now, let's expand this window here by pressing this arrow. Now you'll notice here that there's a bunch of little lines. Let's go ahead and turn down sensitivity to 0 real quick and do that ourselves. So first, what you'll see here is the entire song. These arrows highlight what part of the song will be played. Right now, the whole song is highlighted, so the whole song will be played if I trigger it from the simpler. So if I press my middle C on my keyboard like this, but if I move the arrows to highlight a specific part of the song, it will only play back that part of the song. The highlighted part of the song is what we're going to focus on. So we'll just start from here. We could just click down and zoom in by clicking down and dragging on the mouse. Let's go ahead and move this arrow out a little bit more. Let's give ourselves a little bit more to work with here. Maybe one more big splash here. Okay. This visual picture of all these spikes here and all these other spikes of sound, this visual of them is called waveforms. And you'll notice here that these lines that popped up are detecting different spikes in this waveform. That is the simpler trying to detect where new sounds are coming in and giving you new places to create a chop and to cut out samples. So right now, the sensitivity to detect these spikes in the waveform are at 0. But if you turn it up, you'll notice that you'll start to see blue lines instead of white lines. The white lines are suggestions, but the blue lines actually make a chop. Let's go ahead and clean this up real quick. I'm going to delete these white ones real quick just to make it a little easier to see. All right, let's just see what they came up with, and then we can tweak them from there. I hear some potential in some of these chops. Okay, all right. I'm liking where some of this is going. I think it actually did a pretty good job. I'm gonna just tweak a couple of them real quick. You'll see that this waveform starts a little late, so I want to start right on that snare. Same goes for here. Kind of want it to start clean on that kick. Okay, that's pretty good. Everything else could be a little tighter, but overall, I think it did a great job. If something stands out as being a little rough, I'll go back and tweak it. That's part of the flexibility of chopping with this modern method, is you can just kind of tweak the chops as you go along instead of having to be super committed to exactly where you sliced it. Yeah, I'd say I'm pretty happy with these. One last thing, if you want to create your own chop, you can just double click above an area here and it'll create a white slice there. And let's see if that takes. Oh, that's nice. I'm very pleased with that. Okay. Now that I've shown you the two methods that you can chop samples, let me just give an idea on what you can look for in a sample. Now, with samples, you can either try to find a whole musical phrase, like a whole rhythm or a whole melody or a whole vocal line, and cut that out on its own and make it to where you could just loop that whole section and loop over. For example, you see this section here? It's the first half of a whole musical breakdown. So let me go ahead and delete these real quick. You see that whole section of both his vocal and those multiple notes stomping to like a build. If I wanted to have that musical phrase, that would be one thing I would look for to sample, is just a whole musical phrase or a whole rhythm to loop. Let's go ahead and bring those chops back. Control Z for undo. And the second thing you might look for in a chop is just a really quick hit or a single note. Sometimes people like to just chop out just certain notes of a piano, for example, and then play those notes back in a different order to create their own melody, or just a single hit, like a single drum hit so they can make their own drums, or just a single hit to kind of give like a little quick chop to kind of keep people's attention or to add some ear candy to the song. So an example of a very quick hit would be like, interesting because this is both a drum and a vocal on top. It may sound a little weird on its own, but if you put it in the context of a song or as a second layer, it could actually be pretty dope. especially if you get into further levels of manipulating the sample. That is just the two things you would look for when it comes to what you want to look for in a sample, is either a whole musical phrase with a rhythm and melody, or just individual notes or hits or sounds that you can sprinkle on top or play as their own melody as you see fit. And then I got my sample chops. Let me just show you a couple of quick things for how you can manipulate the samples. So 2 things right off the top. You see these samples? If I hit one and then hit another one, it'll cut off the first and it'll always immediately cut right to the second. Like, they will never play over each other. If you want them to always just cut each other off, keep it in mono. But if you want to have 2 or more notes playing at the same time, change this to poly, and then it'll start with letting you do 6 at a time. Now I can play both at the same time. I can play multiple. You'll see that there's some options down here to further manipulate the sample. Let's say you like the song. But you want to experiment with a higher or lower key or tone. Go ahead, you see this transpose knob down here. It's at 0. Let's go ahead and tweak it down to 1 or 2. Lower than that. Let's do a higher. If you want that chipmunk soul sound, this is a way to do it. Now you'll notice here that it goes higher and lower in pitch, but it also speeds up if I go higher and slows down if I go lower. But let's say I wanted it to be in a higher pitch or a lower tone, but still play at the normal speed. Double click to go back to 0. Let's say I want to play at that speed, but I want it to be in a higher pitch or a lower tone, but still play at the regular speed. What I will do is I will go here and press this warp button. And now, normal speed, if I lower the tone, plays at the same speed. If I put it in a higher pitch, same speed, but in a higher pitch. So this gives you an option to change the tone or the vibe of the sample, but still keep it in its regular time, so it's easier for you to play the chops or time out the chops the way you have it in your head. Let's see, what do I like though? See this tone here? If this is the warp, turn on and off, and then this is the warp algorithms that have like a different way that the computer processes how to manipulate the sample. You hear it in complex mode right now, doing this kind of like a tone of a... If I put it in complex pro, the sound has a little bit more resolution to it, so I'll just keep it on complex pro. And then one more thing we can do is you see this fade in and fade out option down here. So each of these samples, just do a complete raw hard start immediately from each of these sample chop lines. But let's say I wanted it to kind of roll in a tiny little bit so that it doesn't sound so harsh immediately when I start the sample. You can do fade in. And now it fades in the volume to where the beginning of the sample chop has a little bit of smoothness added to it, or just a little bit of harshness kind of faded out of it. You don't want to do it too drastic though. A little bit goes a long way. It helps the beginning not have a pop, but you heard at the end, this one had a pop at the end because it's cutting right into some other audio. We could do that same thing here with the fade out, and now it will smooth out that end as well. Cool. It cuts out just enough to take out the pop at the end, but at the same time keep the overall vibe of that chop. So now that we've manipulated the samples here, let's go ahead and start our sample beat. So we're going to go ahead and bring this window back down. This is our simpler. We're going to go ahead and get rid of the original song on its own. Just go ahead and cut. Now I'm going to just create a loop real quick. This little loop bar, you can expand it out for as many bars as you want. Let's just do a nice 8-bar loop. Turn the loop bar on and off with Control L. So now it'll always loop over and over whatever section this loop bar is highlighted on, like this. Once it gets to the end, it'll start over again. Let's go ahead and I'm going to turn on the metronome real quick. And then this is the tempo. Basically, tempo is another word for speed, and this is how fast or how slow the song will go. So if I turn on the metronome, you can hear how fast the song will go if I press play. You can slow it down. Drag it up. Double click to go back to 120. And then let's say you hear like a drum beat in your head, but you don't know the speed. So go ahead and just tap out the drum beat right here with your mouse. Just be like, boom, ba-tum, boom, 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 ba-tum, boom, 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 ba-tum, boom. You'll notice I'm averaging around 89 or 90. So I'm just gonna double click that and hit 90 and make it a clean 90. Now that I have my sample chops cut and ready to play, first I'm gonna make a drum beat real quick. It gives me an idea on what rhythm I want to play my samples with. So let's go ahead and create a drum rack real quick. Let's see. Drum rack. Here we go. Drag it onto an empty spot. Don't like this color. That's better. All right, now I have a drum rack, and I will just drag individual samples or one shots onto each of these pads and come up with ideas that way. Let's go ahead and just choose some sounds real quick. Oh yeah, cool. That's a good one. Here, I got myself a kick. Vintage kind of final crackle to it as well. Let's just get a hi-hat real quick. Oh, cool. Yeah, nice final hat. Here we go. I'm going to switch the order so it's easy for me to play. Here we go. So you'll notice here I can play these individual samples on their own. One of the reasons why I prefer the drum rack is because each individual pad lets me play an individual sound. So it's very much like playing the drum pads on an MPC, for example. It gives you the ability to just kind of play the sounds in real time and come up with ideas that way. Also, you'll notice that each of these pads have their own little dedicated sampler. So instead of me having one sampler for an entire song, and then all the chops are kind of married together. So if I manipulate this, all the chops are affected. If I manipulate that, all the chops are affected. With the drum rack, I can do tweaks on each individual sound, and it will only affect just that one sound. And then I can tweak this sound on its own, and I can tweak this sound on its own, but they can still play together. Let's see, here's a quick example. Here's this kick. You'll notice that this kick and this snare sound a certain way. If I tweak down the transpose on just the kick, it's lower, but the snare still sounds the way it did before. If you ever want to get back to your original setting in Ableton, just double click whatever setting you tweaked and it'll go back to its original level. So that's one aspect, but also another way you can tweak each sound on its own is, let's say on this particular kick, I wanted a distortion effect. Let's just search all real quick. Let's do something drastic. Yeah, that sounds good. So here's the difference. If I apply this distortion over here, this distortion affects all the sounds. But if I highlight a sound and then I apply that distortion inside that sound right here, it only affects that one highlighted sound. But these other two are normal. And only that sound is being affected. So that's just another way that the drum rack gives you a lot more freedom to really customize each sample you're playing, but still have a way to kind of play them all together and keep track of them all in one area. That's just why I prefer to use the drum rack, because it just gives me more versatility to work with. And now that I've given you a tiny little example on how the drum rack can be used, let me go ahead and just clean this up and we'll just go back to playing the samples just as they are. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Now we're back to our normal samples. So let's see, let's just go ahead and record a little basic drum beat real quick, and then I'll add the percussion on top with two different methods. So let's see, first for this view, this is called the arrangement view. If you press tab, this is called the session view. In arrangement view, this is the recording button you want to use to record an idea. You can press this button or press F9. So here we go. Cool. All right, so now we'll double click on that clip. Let's see, my timing's decent, but you'll see all these notes are highlighted by default. I'm gonna go ahead, since they're all highlighted, I'm gonna press Control U to quantize. Quantize will snap all the notes that are a little bit off to the nearest line in the grid. So you'll see this one here will get snapped to here, and it'll be more in time. It'll be perfectly in time. This one here will get snapped to here, and it'll be perfectly in time. You'll notice that some of these are a little over, so they might snap to this line over here, which I do not want. So to give more refinement in the quantize, I'm going to right click here and then make my grid a lot more narrowed. So now you'll see my grid's been a bit more refined, and it'll have a little bit more refinement for where it's going to snap to instead of it snapping so drastically over left or right. So I'm going to go ahead and press Control U. Perfect. Let me turn off this metronome real quick. Let's see how that sounds. Okay, actually not terrible. I'm going to press Shift Tab to get out of this view, or you can double click this. All right. Now you see I got this hi-hat right here. There's two ways I can add this hi-hat to this beat. The first one is if I want to add something on top of this already recorded piece of music. I'll just start here. I would press this plus button, which is overdub. Overdub allows me to record things and add it on top of stuff instead of erasing stuff. Press this, start here. I'll press F9 to record, and then let's just add some hi-hats real quick. Let's see if I got my hi-hats ready. Here we go, F9. See how I added on top? Click in. Here's my hi-hats that I added. Cool. Again, I could hit, let's refine my quantize grid real quick. And then I could just press Control U. All right, let's just drag them back in place real quick. A couple of them are a bit off, but the rest of them sounded all right. All right, let's try that now. Cool. And then you'll notice here that I recorded it that way for this first half, but for the second half, let's say I didn't want to record it, I just wanted to draw them in. I would press B to create the pencil tool. This is the edit, drag, click tool, whatever. You can do all that kind of stuff with or whatever. Right. But if I want to draw in new notes, I can either double click a space and it'll create a new note, or I can press B and create a pencil tool and then draw them in. All right, you see how I drew in these 4 hi-hats. Press B to go back to the edit mode. Now, let's highlight all 4 notes plus the space around it. So we'll start here at the very end of this part. And then I've highlighted all 4 notes, plus I've highlighted the space around it. You see this little light blue bar. It's highlighting everything in that region up to the end of this part. So it's highlighting both the notes and the space around it so that when I paste it, it'll also copy the exact spacing for the notes. So watch. So I'm going to press Control C for copy. Click here and then Control V for paste. Now it copied over the notes and the space around it, so it's perfectly in time. Perfectly in time. Perfectly in time. So now we'll start here. In the second part, we'll have the same hi-hats. And then just for the sake of variation, I'm going to draw in a couple extra hi-hats here and there just to give it a tiny little bit of spice at the end. Let's do maybe one more here. So now you see I have my drum loop ready. Let's make it one big loop. So I'm just going to go ahead and highlight both by holding down Shift and clicking them and then pressing Control J to join them. Now they're all one big loop. And then highlight it again, press Control L to loop it, just that section. One last thing I'm going to do with this drum beat is it sounds good. All the sounds have kind of a slightly degraded vintage samples style, which is perfect. I do like the sounds to have a little bit of reflectiveness though, just a little bit of room and space instead of sounding so dry. So to do that now, I'm going to add effect to every sound on the drum rack all at once. There's 2 ways to do this. I could either A, add reverb right on top and it'll make everything have the same reverb effect on top of it. You can tweak how much or how little reverb and the different parameters. Sounds good. Actually, you know what? In a funny coincidence, that's cool. I might keep it that way. But there is a more precise way to add reverb to your drum rack and not have your sounds just completely bathed in the reverb. So the second way to add reverb to this drum rack would be, let's just turn this off real quick. So this drum rack here, you see how there's these two little windows here? Every track has these built-in windows. These windows are connected to what are called sends. Sends are effects that are part of the entire project that are just on standby, and you can choose to use them or not. But when you do, here's the benefit of using a send. Instead of having a reverb wash over the entire sound on top of it, in this instance now, the reverb is taking over the drums. Maybe the effect you want, but maybe not give you as much precise, may not give you as many options to have more precise editing or effects on top of it. What you'll want to do instead is you'll use a send, where you'll notice down here there's a reverb already built into the track. If you click on it, you'll see that there's a default reverb here with its default settings. You can change whatever type of reverbs here, but we'll just use the default one for this project. Now here, we're going to play the drum, and then I'm going to slowly turn up this send amount, and then it's going to feed this drum into the send. And the benefit is that instead of the reverb washing over the drums stay perfectly dry on their own. But then this send is going to have a layer of reverb underneath that will be added to the background of the drums. So you still hear the clearness and the preciseness of the drums on top, but there's a second layer of reverb that's copied and then just subtly added beneath it, so that you have the fullness of the dry samples on top with the extra layer of reverb on the back to give it a more fuller, bigger sound. See, you can still hear the clearness of the samples on top, but there's a wall of reverb underneath adding that fullness to it. And then I can change the amount here. Cool. All right, that actually sounds pretty good. So now this drum rack is being fed into this send, the first send being the reverb. The second one's a delay, and you can add more sends if you want, but for now we'll keep it simple. We'll just stick with the reverb that was already built into the track. So that is how we use sends. We'll just go ahead and cut this since we no longer need it. Now that we have our drums, next we'll do our chords, or in this case, I should say sample chops, and then we'll continue with then the melody and then the bass. Now that we have a drum beat, let's go ahead and play some sample chops on top. They will act as our chords because it's basically giving the rhythm and the tonal direction of the song. So let's just go ahead and create a MIDI clip. I'm going to drag highlight this section, and then I can either right click and press insert MIDI clip here, or I can just press Control Shift M and it'll create an entire section for me to create notes and music with. Make sure this is on so you can hear the sounds on your keyboard. If this is off, you can't hear anything. All right, let's go ahead and I'm gonna play the drum beat real quick and then just try to create some rhythms and stuff on top, improv, and then I'll pick out whatever I like and then kind of refine it from there. It's just sometimes fun to just play over and see what you come up with. Okay. I feel like I got an idea here. Hold on. All right, I already hear a couple of ideas, so let's go ahead and try to record that in. And then I'm gonna make a lot of mistakes, but then I'll fix them in edit. All right, double click. Let's just quantize real quick. Control U. Let's see how it plays back a little bit. Oh, right, this little accident right here. Oh, yeah, that's great. I'm going to add that as a little accent in between some of these notes here. I really like that. That's awesome. See, happy accidents, just like Bob Ross, my friends. Bob Ross. I'm going to put him right here in this video as a tribute to that beautiful man. All right, I already have an entire section of a song idea here. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate that. Highlight this, Control-C, and then press Control-D to copy it over here. I'm going to come up with another idea for a different section. I hear an idea potentially in this region for a chorus. This will be like a bridge or like a midpoint kind of a section, and then this I will work on something that's a bit more of the hook. So here we go. Here we go. Control U. Let's just see how this works out. That is lit. I'm loving this. Do 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 do. And then that's its own section. I'm gonna have one more section right here. Let's go ahead and here we go. Okay, so I have sections here, so let's go ahead and just rename these sections real quick. I could right click and go to rename, or I can highlight and press Control R. Chorus, build, now let's just call it a pre-chorus, verse. So now we have 3 sections. So let's just duplicate this real quick. Okay, I'll build out these sections later into like a whole arrangement, but right now this is just the main parts I'm going to be working with. And the very last thing I'm going to do for the samples is I always have a EQ and a utility built into each track. I'll explain those a bit more later, but basically with an EQ, you can just add more volume or cut out less volume of certain frequencies. So let's say I wanted more of the bass emphasized in the samples. I could raise the bass frequencies. Let's say I want to cut out the bass frequencies. Now there's no bass. Okay. Let's say I wanted to highlight the higher end or the sharper parts of the frequencies. Or cut them out. Actually, a little bit of a bump up here would be nice. Before. This is before when everything's turned off. And this is after. It's a little subtle, but it definitely adds enough to make it stand out a little bit more. And then the very last thing I'm going to do with these samples for now, as far as their sound, is I'm going to add a drum bus. So a drum bus is actually designed for drums. It's just a little collection of effects that kind of add more beefiness and more punch to your sound. But I use this on everything. I'm going to go ahead and add it to the samples now. Here we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and just play them on their own real quick through the drum bus before and then after. This is very handy. I'm not going to tweak much stuff, but it already adds just enough more volume and power to it to help the sample stand out a bit more. Let's go and play them together. And then you'll notice that now that I added more power to the samples, they're a little louder than the drums, and you want to be kind of even. So super duper 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 basic mixing lesson. Go to tab. You'll see here, these are the volume meters for each of the instruments. Play. You're going to turn it down until you feel like they're in equal balance or that the right instrument's getting enough emphasis or enough clarity compared to the other instruments. So I think that's good. I think the drums are fine as they are, and I think that this being a -3 helps it stay in level with that. There's infinite more nuance to mixing and stuff, but that is the super duper most basic idea of mixing, is just trying to make sure everything is nice and balanced with each other, and you just take it one instrument at a time. Now we're gonna make a melody. First, we're gonna create another simpler. You just right click here, insert MIDI track, and then let's go ahead and create another simpler, drag it onto the track. Now we have a brand new simpler. And then now let's go ahead and use a singular note, a sample of just one note or one hit. So you could type in the word note and then try to find a sample here. You could change the filter settings to find, let's see, if I typed in the word note and then I press sample, it'll give me every single sample that has the word note in it. Good way to utilize this little filter feature. Perfect. All right. The singular piano note, it's just one note. So I'm gonna go ahead and drag this into this new simpler. It's just one note. If I play it back, the sample is just one note. Now for this next part of explaining the simpler, I'm gonna use the one-shot mode. And this mode allows you to, whenever you press a note, it's gonna play the entire note and just let it ring out entirely. It's not gonna stop. It's not gonna do anything else. It's just gonna, if I press it, it's gonna play the whole thing. But there's an advantage to this mode as well. So you see this one-shot mode, I'm pressing it with the C in my third octave, but if I press any other key higher or lower, it's gonna then pitch it to play that too. So you see, I took that one sample and now I'm playing the sample as if it's its own instrument. The sample is being mapped across my entire keyboard, and now I have a new instrument I can play based on just this one sample. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and just play some notes on top of this and come up with a melody and see what sounds good to me. And then before I do anything else, I'm gonna go ahead and add an effect to this simpler. It's gonna act as my piano. So let's just go ahead and make sure it's on all. And let's look for Flavor Pro. Yes, here we go, Flavor Pro. This is a collection of effects and filters that make everything sound vintage and old school and raw and lo-fi. So here's my piano before Flavor Pro. And here's what it's gonna sound like after. There's many different filters that you can choose from, and they all have their different presets and tweaks and things like that. And you can also choose one and then tweak it yourself further to give it more of a refined sound that you want. Like this is a starting point, and then you can fine tune it as you see fit. I quite like this. I'm gonna turn down the vinyl crackle just a little bit. I could tweak it more here, but I'm just gonna turn it down in general. Cool, so now it has still a lo-fi sound, but it's not nearly as crackly. And then if I wanna make it a bit wider, I could turn up the width or turn it down and keep it more centered and mono. All right, now that I have that, let's go ahead and just play some melodies on top of this and we'll see what we got from there. This closes it out, but it doesn't erase it. It's just closing out the window. Here we go. All right, let's see, Control U. All right, this melody will work for here. And then I'm gonna add a little bit more reverb on top of this melody as well, just to slightly in the send real quick. If I click on a track and press Shift S, it'll solo the track on its own. And then let's play it real quick. Turn up the send. Too much. All right, that's a nice little extra addition here. Let's say I want it to stand out a little bit more, but I don't necessarily want to turn it up. I can just turn this knob here. That's called the pan. The pan dictates the sound going left or right in your earphones and speakers. This is panned all the way to the left. This is panned all the way to the right. I could drag this down here or type in the amount I want by clicking on this. Minus 1.0, enter. Now it's lower by 1 decibel. So now I could play this. But let's say I want it just a little bit off center so that it's still pretty much in the main part of the sound, but it's just a little bit to the right, so it stands out just a tiny bit compared to the other stuff. Now we'll go ahead and unsolo that and play. I'm not going to bore you with me coming up with the melody parts here. You'll hear the melodies I come up with this at the end of the lesson. Now I have my melodies created for the sections of the song. Now I'm going to create some bass for the sections of the song. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and record a bass for this song. And once again, we're going to use the simpler, insert MIDI track. drag it onto the empty space. And then we're going to go ahead and add a bass sample to this sampler. Here we go. That's a nice little bass sample. It's just one note of a bass. So I'm going to go ahead and drag it down here. Now, I've already explained slice mode and I've already explained one-shot mode. Now let's use classic. Classic is similar to one-shot in the sense that if I play the middle C, for example, it'll play out the whole note. Except the difference is if I let it go, it stops. In one-shot mode, if I play it, it'll play the entire note no matter what I do. But in classic, it only plays as long as I hold it down. And that's exactly what I want, because sometimes when you're playing a bass, you'll hold a note and then cut it off rhythmically to kind of create that groove. And we can mimic that with a sample by using classic mode. Also, yes, if you press any keys up or down, it'll also play in those notes as well. So this gives us a different option on how to play back a sample, and it gives us more of a deliberate cutoff and a chop. So let's go ahead here and create a MIDI clip. For now, I'm just gonna play notes here until it sounds good with this, and then I'll work backwards from that. All right, now I'm gonna play along with my bass until I find something that sounds good. Nice and low. I can boost the bass frequency just a tiny bit with this. I can cut off some of the high end doing that. There are more precise ways to utilize this, but that's just me doing it raw and dragging it down manually. Nice little beefy bass. I won't bore you with this, but I'll show you what I come up with at the end. Go ahead and single this out real quick. And first let's quantize. And then now we're going to play back just the bass on its own. And you'll hear that the bass note will play, then stop abruptly, play, stop abruptly. And these gaps in between the notes is what's causing the up and down and the rhythm. It's causing those pockets of space that give it the groove and kind of the swing. This note's a little off. All right. And then, yeah, I think that's good. Okay, I could clean up the notes a little bit just to give the rhythm a lot more precision. All right, now that I've done that, I'm gonna do some similar stuff here real quick, and then I'll lay out the song, and we have a song. Hurrah! All right. All right, so I decided to double this up here. So what we're gonna do is we're just gonna play through the chorus, then it's gonna go through the verse, then it's gonna go to the build, and then back to the chorus. We'll start it off without this extra melody. So I highlighted those by pressing Shift and then click on both and then pressing 0 to deactivate that sound. So we'll play through it. Then when it comes back to this, I'll add this melody back for a dramatic effect. That is our sample beat. So that's just some basics you can start off with. some basic ways to manipulate the sample, some basic ways to use the simpler to your advantage and the drum rack. Next, I will show you how to make a trap beat. Hopefully that goes well. I'm going to recreate a song I used in a past video and try to flesh it out a little bit more. So this was just a little basic idea on how to arrange a song, but the next one I'll do a much more elaborate arrangement and a much longer beat. All right, let's hope for the best. See you then. All right, welcome back everyone. Today I am going to go over how to make a trap beat. I'm going to break this video down into two main sections. The first section, I'm going to explain the main elements of a trap beat. And as I build each element, I'm also going to teach you some basics about music production. Then the second section of this lesson, I will go through making two main sections of a song, and I will explain other production elements as I go along, including maybe some more EQ, maybe some compression, some sidechaining, and how to master your track or how to build a master chain so you can master your own songs. Okay, so when it comes to trap music, there's three main elements. There's the 808s. Let's pull out some 808s now. Let's type up some 808s. So we'll play a few as an example of the kind of sounds they are. 808s, of course, are those synthesized kicks that have that long bassy sound and that kind of tail that fades out after a little bit. And they're called 808s because they come from the classic 808 drum machine. It's a clean one. That's a heavy one. I might use this actually. I do like that. Now that I've explained a little bit about 808s and what they sound like, let's go ahead and show two ways to use them. First, let me go ahead and get an 808 for our project. Add it to the simpler. Let's just play it out a little bit in one-shot mode. Nice, I like this sound. Typically, there are two ways you would make a 808 in a trap song. The first way is you just do short little mini melodies. I'm talking really short, like 3 or 4 notes at a most. You just basically choose a rhythm, something like and then you would just keep that same rhythm, but you would choose different notes to play on that rhythm. Let's go ahead and record out that rhythm real quick. All right, now I have my 5-note rhythm. Let's try something a little bit lower. Now I would just choose different notes to turn this little mini rhythm into a mini melody. Let's just do these notes using the notes from a B major chord. I got B. Here we go. Let's just do this one here. And then let's just do this one up here. All right, let's give that a try. Let's try another one real quick. I'm lowering the tempo to give it a bit of a different rhythm. I create another rhythm. Let's hear it out real quick. And then here I'm on a C, so let's just do a C major. Let's use the notes in a C major. And quick tip, the notes that you're using in a chord, they're usually following a musical scale. A scale is just a set pattern or a set rules on what notes play well with each other. The most basic version of a scale is the notes that make a chord are typically the same notes that are part of that musical scale. So if I make an A major chord, I'm using some of the notes of an A major scale. You could also press this highlight scale button right here, and you see these purple bars. If I move any of these notes within these purple bars, it will sound good because it's all going to be within that same C major scale. There's other ways you could turn it on and off, but this is a super basic way to get that ball rolling. So here, let's go ahead and just try this now. I'm just doing this randomly, but I'm confident it'll sound good and I'll tweak it to my own taste. All right, cool. I don't want it to go crazy all over the place. I just want a little bit of variety here and there. And when it comes to trap music, you also kind of want the melodies to be dark. Like the melodies themselves always end in like a sour note or kind of curve downwards towards your scale. But I think this sounds good. This is just a little added variety spice, but the majority is going to be kind of this narrow lane to kind of keep that kind of like downward monotone kind of vibe going. use this to help you if you want, or you can kind of just do it by ear. And then after that, you have your own little mini melody. All right, now I have a drum kit. So the first way you use your 808 is have it play its own melody like this. Let's go back to 163 real quick for this loop here. I'm gonna draw in a very, very, very basic trap beat real quick. Now I have a basic drum beat. Now it's gonna play with this loop real quick. So you'll notice that this is doing its own thing and it's on its own rhythm. And the drum beat is on its own rhythm as well. The bass and the kicks don't really match up. And that's kind of the whole point. Some trap beats are intentionally like that. That's the first way you would utilize your 808s to make a melody for a trap song. Now this is the second way. So you notice again, these did not really match up with the kicks and the snares. They were doing their own rhythm and this was doing its own rhythm. And that kind of interplay between the two gives it a nice syncopation, a nice kind of like back and forth with each other. And second way you would use an 808 is this time, when you use an 808, you're actually going to make the drum beat first, and then you're going to add your 808s to each kick, and the kick and the bass at the same time is going to create a much fuller punch every time they both hit together. And the kick in your drums is going to make up the rhythm for you. You don't have to think of a separate rhythm for the bass. The kick rhythm you're going to create right now will also be the rhythm for your bass. So I'll show you how to do that now. Let's create a new drum beat real quick. Let's just draw something in. All right, you see my kick pattern here? Watch this. I'm gonna click on the kick pattern right here. I'm gonna press Control C to copy. Then I'm gonna create a MIDI clip for the bass real quick. Then I'm going to click here to start where I wanna paste it, press paste. Now I have that same exact rhythm that my kick has for my 808s. I noticed that this is in a very low octave. There's not a whole lot of breathing room for the 808. So let's move this up a couple octaves. There we go. Now let's play them together and see how they sound. So you see now, because I created a rhythm and a pattern on the kick for the drums, I can now just copy that and use that to make my rhythm for the 808. And now again, let's just highlight scale. Let's just choose some notes to give it a little bit more variety, and then we'll play them back together. You can choose to use method A to make an 808 melody or method B to pair them with the kick. There's no right or wrong way, it's a preference. Now that I've taught you a little bit on how you can make a 808 melody, now let's teach you how to tune your 808s. Now let me teach you how to tune your 808s. Let's go ahead and clear these out real quick. So here's how you tune your 808s. Let's go ahead and load a sampler real quick. Now, there are going to be two things we need to look for when we use an 808, and that will determine if and how we're going to tune the 808. So one, if you look for an 808 and you see that an 808 has a letter associated with it, like an A, for example, or a C2, that means that this 808 is tuned to the A note, or this 808 is tuned to the C in the second octave. So if that's the case, we can test this just to make sure they're already in tune. Let's try a clean 808 that's a C note. I got the C down here. Let's go ahead and press a C just to make sure it sounds like a C. Sounds like a C to me, and I'm pressing the C on my keyboard, but there's a way we can do this just to be sure. So let's go ahead and type in tuner, add this to my track. Now I'm gonna press a C again, and let's see what note it's actually hitting. Well, look at that, right on the C. So this labeling was telling the truth. This is a 808, that's a C note. That's the first way, just to make sure your 808 is in tune. The second way, and this one takes a little extra work, but I promise you it is worth it to give you more options, is let's look up another 808. This time, we'll go back to the one I had before. I really like this one, but you'll notice this 808 does not have a musical note attached to it. It just says 808 stock 2. I have no idea where it is on the keyboard. I'm going to go ahead and just press a C note in the middle of my keyboard real quick, and let's see what note it actually plays as. I'm going to press C, but let's see what the note is tuned to. So if I press a C, it actually creates a G. Right off the bat, I need to pitch this up to match C. So the first thing I'm going to do is, you see this transport control here? If I'm at G and I want to get to C, I need to count up my keyboard. Let's count up. Let's see, G to G sharp is 1, G sharp to A is 2, A to A sharp is 3, A sharp to B is 4, and B to C is 5. So I have to tune this up 5 semitones to get it to match C. So G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and C. Now if I press C, this should also play as a C. Good, I got it pitched up to a C. So now this will match my keyboard. If I press a G, it will be a real G. If I press C, it will be a real C. But you'll notice that it's a little shy of being a perfect C. It's like 16.5 cents off from being a perfect C. So let's go ahead and tune that now. So right here, we're going to go to controls. And you'll notice here I already tweaked up a few notes, but now we're going to tweak it up a tiny little bit of cents just to get it a bit sharper, a bit more perfect. So since I'm below 16.5, let's crank this up 16.5. I can only do it in full numbers. Let's just do 16. Now when I press C, it's right on the money basically. No 808 will be 100% perfect, but the fact that I'm like 99% perfect is good enough for me. All right, I did 17 and it's basically right on the money, give or take a half a cent. And I'm okay with that. But that is how you tune your 808. So either A, it's going to be pre-tuned and the letter from wherever it came from will tell you exactly what note it's supposed to be. Or B, if you have no idea what note it is, you can test it with this and then pitch it to match where it's supposed to be on a keyboard. So this is a real C, this is a real G, and it's right on the money. It's nice and in tune. Okay, now that we've gone over 808s, let's go over the second element in a trap beat, which is the drums. The drums basically have the kick, snare, hi-hat combo. The main difference is that you're going to have a lot of space between the kick and the snare. And then in between those big gaps between the kick and the snare, you're going to have a bunch of little hi-hats. Usually it's just a constant note of super basic, but then you'll add extra little fast fills here and there to give it that swing and that rhythm. Basically with the hi-hats, you just want a lot of constant hats to give the song a constant momentum. And then you can rhythmically speed up that momentum or slow down the momentum for dramatic effect. I'll show you some basic trap drum patterns right now. And then after that, I'll show you how you can make your own hi-hat patterns. All right, I'm gonna show you 3 different trap patterns just to get started. You'll notice there's a lot of space between the kick and the snare. The kick will often play its own rhythm and give the song a lot of drive. The snare is just kind of the highlight every couple of bars or so. And the hi-hats play a constant single notes, but occasionally have little sped up fills here and there to give it its own little counter rhythm. Here's another one played at a lower speed. And then here's the last one played at a slightly different speed. All right, so now I will teach you how to make your own trap drums, the kind of sounds we're going to look for, how to space out your kick and your snare, and then how to create your own hi-hat patterns and quick fills. And then I'll also teach you how to pitch up and down your hi-hats for a cooler, more modern effect. First things first, let's create a drum rack. Now, this is just my basic understanding of trap drums. I guarantee you, if you go online and look up like Zaytoven or Metro Boomin and watch their drum patterns, they're going to give you A quality drum patterns. If you want to see a masterclass, check them out. Let's create a MIDI clip. Let's load some drum samples real quick. Now, I could easily just type in trap and look through and see what I like. But typically when it comes to trap kicks, there's really only one of two types of sounds you're looking for. Either A, you're gonna look for a boomy 808 with a punch that acts as a kick. Or B, you're gonna find a very flat, very punchy drum machine kick, but it's only gonna be just the very first part and there's not gonna be any boominess to it. It's just gonna be a very quick, very single, very flat hit. The advantage and disadvantage for both of them are as follows. If you choose the trap kick that has that boomy 808 sound to it, then congratulations, you already got an 808 for your song as well. But it means that by default, your 808 is married to your kick. So whatever your kick rhythm is, your 808 rhythm will be. If that's the sound you want, then perfect. You've killed two birds with one stone. The other option though, if you choose a kick that's just flat, then you can pair a 808 to it or have it be a very dry counterpoint to your very full 808. Me personally, I like to have a flat one that I can pair with an 808. So I'm going to choose something like that now. All right, nice and flat. Next, I'm going to choose a trap snare. Now, when it comes to trap snares, of course, they're going to have that same drum machine sound from the 80s. A lot of them have that very flat synthetic snare sound like this. Something like that. Something quick, something snappy. And then with modern trap, there's a lot more variety. There's like reverb snares, wood snares. The snares now are kind of experimental in modern trap, which is pretty cool. Let's show you some of those now. All right, I'm going to choose a wood snare. And then let's go ahead and choose a hi-hat. Again, the same basic principles apply. Either A, you choose a very traditional 808 sounding hi-hat from a classic drum machine, or B, you choose a more modern hi-hat with a bit more effects and a bit more texture and foley to it. Me personally, I prefer cleaner hats when I'm making trap. I just like them to stand out and be clean. So I'm going to choose a hi-hat for now, but I may choose to change out the hi-hat later if I feel like I could choose a better fit for the song. Okay, so now I have my... So let's go ahead and build out the drum pattern real quick. Let's choose a tempo. Let's do 163. Now I'm going to go ahead and just draw in some notes real quick, and then we will break down kick, snare, and then hi-hat patterns. So right off the jump, this is going to be my kick and snare pattern. And I'm going to have this kick pattern become the main rhythm of my 808. So let's do this. All right, I chose a new hi-hat. I might choose another one later depending on how the song flows, but for now, this will work for me. Let's see what my trap pattern is now. So you saw how I drew those in, but if you want more options on how to create hi-hat patterns, watch this. I'm gonna erase all this real quick. Now I'm gonna draw a single note here, expand it out for 2 bars, and then watch this. So I have my pencil tool. I'm gonna press B to put it back to my edit tool. Make sure I have this highlighted here. Then I'm gonna hold Control and E, and you'll notice now that my note has been divided into many little notes. If I let go, that's how it is now. If I hold down Control E again and I drag down my mouse a little bit, I can choose how much it's going to divide up. So right off the jump, I can make it 2 big notes. I could then go to this section and make this with Control E 8 notes. And I could go to this section, Control E, and drag this up and make this, let's do 4 and 8. And then I could go to each individual section, Control E again, and then drag up as much as I want. Let's do another 4 here. And then here, let's do a really quick 4. All right. See, right off the jump, you can create instant trap patterns with just Control E and dragging up and down. I think that's a really intuitive thing that Ableton included in a recent update. So if you're ever out of ideas, just create a note and chop it up and see what sticks. Paste here. All right, let's see how it sounds. All right, now you see this intricate hi-hat pattern, right? Now, there are 2 ways that you can also pitch up and down your hi-hats to give it a cooler, more dramatic effect. There's the old school method and the new school method. Old school is the following. Go down here to your drum rack, copy this here, and we're gonna paste it in 2 more places. We're gonna hold Control and drag it there. Now it's duplicated, hold Control and drag it to the next one. Now it's duplicated. Now we have 3 copies of the same hi-hat. Let's see how it looks in here. So I have 3 copies of the same sound here. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna keep this pitch normal. We're gonna change the pitch on these other 2 copies real quick. So let's go down here. So let's go to this copy, this first copy, and let's pitch this up by, let's do 3. And then this next copy, we're gonna pitch this down by 2. Okay, now that I have these 2 pitched up and down in different spaces here, I could actually rename this real quick. So let's just do hat -0. Then let's rename this one and we'll do hat +3. And then this one we'll rename as hat -2. Now you can see they're renamed here. And let's go ahead and just do some little counter melodies here. Maybe I can scroll up and down a little bit and then just have it pitch up and down sometimes when I feel like it. Now let's see how that sounds. Now that I have my original hi-hat back, I'll show you another way that you can pitch up and down your notes. So that was the old school method. The newer school method would be using automation. Automation is just you telling the program what to do and when to do it. You can program it to turn the volume up at a certain time, to turn down the pitch at a certain time, and you can just program exactly when and where you want it to do it. So I'll show you how to trigger automation in Ableton now. You can just press A on your computer keyboard, and now we'll turn on the automation view. And you'll go over here and you'll see this little drop-down menu. And this shows you all the different sounds that you can program automation on. Let's just choose the trap kick. Now, once you do that, there's another drop-down menu that lets you look at all the different options and parameters and features of that sound, and you can automate any one of these. Now, there's another way to find the option you want to automate. So instead of using this drop-down menu, you can actually just go straight to the sound you want to put some automation on. Let's see, this was the trap kick, but I want to put automation on the hi-hat, the main hi-hat. So let's make sure we click on that hi-hat. And now that we've done that, I want to automate its pitch up and down. So to do that, I will go to Transpose here. I would right-click this Transpose knob, and I would choose one of these 2 options, either show automation or show automation in new lane. Showing automation in new lane creates a duplicate and lets you edit your automation here and keep your regular MIDI notes up here, and you can kind of keep an easier track of what's going on. But for this example, I'm going to use just regular show automation. Now it's going to be on the actual MIDI track itself. Let's go ahead and expand this out a little bit like this. And then now you'll see that there is a grid of +12 and -12 for the transpose. This can go all the way up to actually 48, and then this can go down to -48. But we're only going to need to stay in this 12 range here. Let's go ahead and just do it for this whole second half of my drum loop. So you notice here, here's my hi-hats, here's my kicks, here's my snares, here's my hi-hats, right? And this is the pitch of the hi-hats. This is what this red line is. It's just the transpose of the hi-hat. That's all it is. So to pitch up and down with automation, I could do it one of 2 ways. I can either click on this red line and it'll create a node, and then you click on another spot to create another node. And then you'll click on one here and you'll click on one there. And then you can drag this up and down this grid to tell it how high you want it to go. So this very first note will start at 4 semitones or 4 pitches above its normal pitch. And then this group of notes here will go back to normal. And then this note, we could do that here and then draw another one. Then I'll go back to normal here. And then these 4 notes, I could do this. I could click one here, 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 and then just pitch it down for each separate note like this. So this way is a little cumbersome, but it does have its pros and cons. All right. And then the second way you can do it is if I press B, it goes to draw mode and it gives me a little bit more freedom to just kind of like draw in and out each line, each grid. If I wanted to just go down, let's say this exact row, I want to go up a few, I can just do that. Boom, very clean. And if I want this exact row to go down, boom, I can just do that. Boom, very clean. And then also depending on the grid, you can like kind of free draw. You can also right click and then change how fixed the grid is, so it's even more narrow. Or you can right click again and take off snap to grid, and now you can kind of like free draw very, very like smooth gradual builds and fades and whatnot. And then now that I'm in draw mode, I could also, let's see, this is the first half of my drum loop and this is the second half. Let's say I wanted to copy this exact automation information to the second half of this loop. I'll press B, go back to this edit mode, highlight the whole space I want to copy, including this space here, press duplicate, and now it's applied here as well. And then you'll notice too that it's still highlighted with this like light blue color, and it has these like little dots around it. With the dots, you can actually move this automation down to have much lower values. You could do the same thing and have much higher values. You can also shrink the size of how long the automation hits. So I could do this and kind of squeeze it all in to be only in this half right here. I could just tweak that down and boom, now I got this automation crunched down into just the second half over here. And you can also do this here as well. You can even do it diagonally with this upper corner one here, same over here, and same here and there. Okay, now that I have my automation, for this last part, I'm going to put the wood snare on this hi-hat pad right here. Now that I got this automation lesson out of the way, next let's go ahead and talk about the third element typically heard in trap music, which is the melody. Okay, typically in a trap song, there is usually just a little melody on top. The melodies are not typically very complicated. They're actually very sparse. You're either basically picking a pluck or a synth with like a very sharp note to it. You choose whatever you want, but typically I think that you want something more percussive on top just to help stand out a bit more, especially in such bass heavy music. And you'll notice that the effects on the leads themselves will end up filling out a lot of the empty space, which will give the track a lot more color even from just the lead. Me personally, I prefer to take a one shot and then just kind of play as I see fit. So I'm going to take something a bit percussive, but it's going to be a sample. Cool. So this is the one I like quite a bit. Drag it on, trim it down a tiny bit, and then play it in one-shot mode. And then just to give it a little bit more unique character, once again, I'm going to use Flavor Pro. I'm going to add more effects to this harp when I get to the next section of the video, which is going to be under sound design. So we'll save that for then. I'm going to use this harp as one of my melodies. I'm going to add 2 more melodies. The next part is going to have a very intricate melody. And then the third melody is just going to be a nice little extra few notes on top to kind of tie some of the chords and changes together. And then this next one, I'm going to teach you about arpeggios. An arpeggio basically takes a chord, chops it up evenly, whether it be by 4ths, by 8ths, by 16ths, whatever. And then it just plays those notes that are chopped up and down or back and forth in certain patterns. I'll demonstrate what an arpeggio does right now. There's 2 ways that you can do that. And just like my other lessons, there's the old school way and the new school way. The old school way to make an arpeggio is as follows. Let's add a Fabric XL to that real quick. Let's choose a very clean instrument, Studio Grand. Okay, now let's create a MIDI clip real quick. Hold down your chord shape. You can just hold the forward arrow key and draw out the chord as long or press back as short as you want. Let's say I also want to add an A and a lower octave, hold it down and then press the forward arrow key. Now I'm just gonna have a sustained A major chord. Now, to make your own arpeggio, what you would do is, let's right click and change this to 1/4. Then I would take the Control E tool and I would go to every single line, each fourth like that, like this, and like this. Then I would choose the order that the notes would play one at a time. So I'll just take a note out of here. So this first fourth will only play the low A, and then we're gonna have this next one play this next one, and this next one play this one higher, and then this one play the highest one. And then it's going to go back to the very first note. So this is a basic arpeggio where it's going to play my chord in even intervals. And then I just chose a direction that's going to play those notes in that chord. This is just an upward arpeggio. This is a downward arpeggio. We'll start here. This is in 1/4. If I wanted to double up, I could do this. Right click, go to eighths. And then let's just do this real quick. I would do that, do this, just move them over to fit in half of the space, then duplicate. And then I would do the same thing here. Okay, then I would duplicate this. And now this would be me doing an upwards arpeggio in eighths or 1/8, and then a downwards arpeggio in 1/8. So you see, the more you cut it up, the faster the notes go, or at the very least, if you condense shorter notes together, it feels faster. You could space them out, but for this demonstration, we'll just keep them one right after the other. So that would be the manual, old school way of making an arpeggio. Many different ways you can do that. Or if you wanted, you could use an arpeggio tool and it can make arpeggios for you. So let me go ahead and copy this out real quick, just for as a visual reference. Okay, now I've made a few loops for you to see just how an arpeggio works. This first loop is just going to be an A major chord with the arpeggio tool applied to it. And then this next two is going to be an A major chord cut into fourths, going up a couple of times. And this is going to be an A major chord cut into fourths, going down a couple of times. And then the same thing for the A major going up in eighths, and then the same thing going down A major in eighths. Let me show you how this matches what's going to happen to this. So here, let's go ahead and add an arpeggiator real quick. So you'll notice the arpeggiator has some parameters here, and the very first one is going to be just playing it going up. You'll notice that the rate is at 1/8. Let's turn this down to 1/4 to match our example. Now that I've applied this to this instrument, when I press play, it's going to pretend like it's chopping up my chord and then play each of those chops upwards in fourths. Let's see. So you see, it's doing that exact same thing that I did over here, but it's just applying it to this. It's simulating doing that to this. It's basically an automation telling it to play it as if it were like this. So that's how an arpeggiator works upward, 1/4 up, and then let's see 1/4 down. Start from the beginning. It's the same as if it's doing this. I'm going to play it right from here. Same exact thing. And there's other variables, but that's the basics of how I want to introduce arpeggiators to you. And same thing for up in eighths and down in eighths. If I go up once again, but I put it as to 1/8, now it's going to play as if it's doing this. So we'll start here. Same exact thing as if it was doing this. Same goes for down. So now that you see how an arpeggiator can add up and down scale melodies to your song, I'm actually going to have this done with like a club synth in the background as like to create this massive kind of ravey wall of sound. So that is going to be my second melody. And then the last melody, it's just going to be a piano on top. I just hear these kind of like piano chord splashes here and there to kind of make it sound a little bit more dramatic when a song goes from one section to the next. Fabric, one more time. Wool. It's a very soft, very classically inspired piano with a little bit of like tape warmth to it. I know there's going to be some parts I'm going to add a splash of a chord here and there just to kind of highlight certain sections. Okay, We're almost at assembling the song, but the last thing we need to do before we assemble our song is to do some sound design. So sound design is basically shaping your sounds, tweaking them, manipulating them to either A, sound the way you want them to sound, or B, to get them to work with each other. Now, the very first thing I'm going to do before anything else is I'm going to finalize my sounds. So I'm going to choose the kick and the snare and the hi-hat and maybe an extra percussion here because I know there's like a little extra percussion or two I want to add. So let's see. Kick is a little flat. I kind of want a beefier kick. I kind of like this low end here. Let's try this. All right, I like that a lot better. Already that sounds good. It has a bit of like a bassy kind of tail at the end of it, and I want to cut that out because what I'm going to do is if I'm going to have my 808 and my kick playing together at the exact same time, I want them to kind of merge into like one sound and not have this bassy tail bleed over the 808's bassy tail. So I could shape that a little bit. Let's do this now. I could either just cut out how much of the sample I want to play and only have just that sharp part play like this, but it's too damn short. So instead, what I can do is I can either use this EQ, make sure that this EQ is applied to the sound directly. So I'm going to just take this one that would have been applied to the entire drum rack and apply it to just that one sound by doing this. And now this EQ is only going to affect this one sound. You'll notice that if I hit another one, it doesn't have an EQ, but if I hit just this one, it has an EQ. Then what I could do is with the EQ here, I can hit one of these 8 bands. It's a multi-band EQ, EQ8. And you can choose one of these nodes or you can activate another node if you want. But I don't need all these nodes. I only really need the 4, maybe even less. And then what I'm going to do there is I'm going to choose node 1. And then these are different shapes on how they want to draw the the little filters and such. This is basically cutting out all the low end. This shape here is going to cut out all the low end. And then this shape here is going to cut out all the high end. And then this is like a bell that lets you like shape up the frequency like this. I'll run through a couple of these. Basically, you choose your node, and this window represents the entire spectrum of all your sound. This low end is all the bass frequencies in your music, and then this high end is all the sharp percussive sounds in all your music, and then this is the middle stuff like guitars and pianos and whatnot. You can expand it with this window here. And then this, where your mouse goes, it tells you exactly how much of the hertz you're at and what part of that like sound spectrum you're affecting. So yeah, we're on node 1. I'm going to just go ahead and minimize this just for convenience. And then I'm going to go ahead and turn down this frequency. So right now, if I put node 1 over here, I can have it affect everything around the 12 hertz region of all of our sound. If I want this to affect everything in a super high end, I can move it up that way and have it affect up to the 13.5 kilohertz up here and affect all the higher sparkly stuff of our sounds. Double click to go back to normal. I'm going to just do a quick low cut, a very sharp low cut. And now all the bassiness here is going to get cut out thanks to this. So I'm going to play this track real quick and you'll see that it's not going to immediately affect it. But when I start tweaking where I'm cutting off the frequency, then you'll hear its effect. So I'm going to play this. The bassiness is still there, but I'm going to turn on the EQ right here. Then I'm going to tweak this and cut out more of the low end. It's only cutting out maybe about 30, everything below 30 hertz or so, but I want to cut out more. So I'm going to go ahead and tweak this here. And now it's cutting out everything below 100. And it's cut out all the bassiness and it only kept the little high end area. Maybe it's too much. Keep a tiny bit of bassiness, but keep most of the high part that I want. Or keep the full lowness. Also, if you want to enhance a certain part, this part here will raise or lower how much you're emphasizing wherever this note is. So if I want to raise the bass, I could crank up the bass like this, or completely just sweep it out altogether by doing that. That's my first option. And then my second option is the old school way, which is just basically fade it out before this bassiness kicks in. So I could just do this, and then I could just shorten how long the sample will play. And then now you're going to mostly hear just this, and then it'll fade out before the rest of this bassiness is even audible. Turn this off. Now you're going to hear just mostly this, and then it'll fade out before the rest of this bassiness kind of kicks in. And then if I want to fill out that remaining part here, I could use them both together. So it's going to fade out that bassness, but if I want to also enhance that high part, I could still tweak this to enhance the higher part. And Increase the mid a little bit. All right, so I did this with the EQ. So now I got my kick the way I want it to sound. The snare, I think, is just fine. I just like the sound as is, so no need to just add tweaks for the sake of adding tweaks. This hi-hat I will keep for now. I'm mostly good with it, but I'm not in love with it. So we'll see how that pans out throughout the rest of the song. One thing I am going to do, however, is the kick, snare, hi-hat. I kind of want to change their pan a little bit so that they sound a bit better in the mix with each other. This kick I'm going to keep dead center, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on this extra panel of things I can manipulate with the drums. Here we go. And then each drum has their own individual chain here. So this first one, the kick, I want it to stay dead center. This snare, I kind of want it to be a little tiny bit to the right, just to give it a tiny little bit of space to stand out. And then this hi-hat, kind of want to be a little bit to the left just to stand out just a tiny little bit. It's very subtle, but you will hear a little bit more clarity. And then you know what? I like this wood percussion. I'm going to keep it too. That's pretty cool. I'm going to drag this down here. Now it's going to be on this pad. And then I kind of want this to be like an extra little hit every now and then. So I'm going to go ahead and just pan this a bit more to the right. And now it's going to be more in the right channel. And then every so often when it plays, it'll just stand out as its own little special little spark every now and then in its own little area. And then let me add some more percussion because I have a couple more things I want to add. Funny enough, I kind of want that. I am going to turn that down a little bit though. It's kind of loud. Maybe 8. All right, that'll be subtle enough. And then I'm actually going to add a little bit more reverb. I kind of want it to be very distant in the background, very subtle, very subconscious. I'm going to drag that right onto that specific Holy sound. I think I know how I'm going to apply it. And then one more thing, I kind of want a synth cymbal. So I think this is going to be my kit. All right, so this is my completed drum pattern. I'm just going to take these 2 bars, added a little pop for this first half, and then added some extra percussion and a splash for the second half. And I'm just going to repeat that over and over again. This is a demonstration song. I don't really need too many different drum patterns anyway. All right, let's see what we got here. Now that I have my sounds kind of finalized for now, the next thing I'm going to do to this drum rack is add compression. So right now the drums sound like this. And what I want to do next is get all the sounds to kind of be around the same volume to each other so that all the bigger sounds are a little bit lower and all the lower sounds are a little bit higher. And in turn, it will kind of make all the sounds sound like one big instrument instead of a bunch of little individual drum sounds playing around each other. So first thing I'm going to do just to help you visualize this is I'm going to add a free effect called Wave Observer. It lets you see what your sounds are playing in like waveforms. So let's play it real quick. Now you see those big spikes that wiggle out. That is my kick. Those little smaller spikes that are right around this region are my hi-hats. And then my snare is that one with the solid blue that has a longer tail. You'll notice that my kicks tend to hit around 3 dB here, negative 3 dB here. And then my hi-hats are around maybe between 12 and 24. And then my snare tends to be around maybe between 6 and 12. Right around here. So what I want to do is I'm going to add a compressor to lower those high spikes of the kick and make them get lower and closer to the center area where the rest of the sounds are. And then after that, I'm going to enhance all the sounds together and then beef them back up. So I'll show you how that works now. So on this track, let's add a compressor. I'm going to add it to the whole track itself, not just one sound on the track. I'm going to switch the order of this. Okay, so right now, this is just the regular no input. Let's change it to drum rack. So this is all the sounds on the drum rack. And then this is pre-effects. This is the sounds before it gets fed to anything. All right, change this here. Put this on peak mode. It'll make the compression a lot more precise and immediate. This is a bit more smoother and kind of gradual. This is a compressor, and basically what happens is this is the line for the threshold, and we're gonna raise this all the way up real quick. See these high peaks right here? That's my kick. My snares and my hats are all around the same level, which is good. It's my kicks that are overdoing it. And you may think you want that, but when it comes to mixing later on, and also for clarity's sake, it's actually not a good thing. It might become overpowering or punch too much in the mix. So let me show you how to tame that now. I could just turn it down here, but this is an automated way to do it. And it also gives your overall drum sound a much more unified and fatter sound to it. What I'll do now is I'm going to turn down this threshold. You see how it's above at 6 dB. I'm going to put it down here. You see how it gets like right around 0. I'm going to lower it down maybe about 3 dB or so. That's good enough. And then what's going to happen next is you notice those spikes that kept going above that 0 line where that yellow line is now. That yellow line is a 0 line here. Every time a spike goes above this blue threshold line, for every 3 dB that a spike goes above this line, it's only going to play back 1 dB. For every 2 dB that the spike goes above my threshold, it'll only play back 1 dB. So it's a reduction thing, basically. So if I'm going over by 2, it's only going to let me play back 1. If I'm going over by 3, it's only going to play back 1. And then you can change up the ratio up and down as you see fit. I'm going to just put mine at a 2/1. And then attack is how fast that compression effect of like reducing the volume kicks in. So it'll take 1 second to kick in. That's actually kind of late. Like that could be cool for some types of sounds, but I want mine to kick in like immediately. So I'm going to go ahead and just crank that to 0.01 milliseconds. So right off the jump, it's going to kick in the instantaneous second, basically, that the kick goes past that threshold. It's going to pump it back down damn near instantaneously. And then release is how fast my volume, once it's kicked down, goes back up to normal volume. So this is 30.0 milliseconds. I think it's fine, honestly. So let's just see how that sounds. We're going to turn this off. We're going to play it before. Then we're going to play it after. It's going to sound a little weird at first, but you'll see what I'm going for. You'll notice that the kicks no longer spike out. They are now around the same volume as everything else. So it makes it to where like they all sound like one unified instrument and not just a bunch of louder and softer instruments trying to fight for space. I'm going to raise this up a little bit. Reduce it just a little bit. And this is, you see those yellow lines? That's how much is being kicked back down. This is how much it gets kicked down in real time for every single one of those kicks based on my ratio. And then if I wanted to, I could raise the attack. It takes a second for the attack to kick in. So my kick is so quick that it disappears before this attack can even take effect. And then my release, I could extend the release, and then it'll take so long to get back up to normal volume that the next kick is going to kick in before I can even get back to normal volume. But look how long it takes to even try to get back up. It's going so slowly that by the time it's even starting to get up, the next kick has already taken place and it's starting over and over and over and over again. So that's kind of how these two parameters play with each other. And then let me show you what else. On this waveform, remember how high those kicks used to be right around here? Now those kicks have been tamed down, and now it's about the same relative volume as the snares and the hi-hats. So they all are about the same volume now. Also, it makes the kicks feel a little bit fatter, but also another thing you'll notice is that the overall volume of this drum rack actually is a little bit lower now. Overall, it's a little bit lower. So to get that volume back to where you want it to be, basically up in this like -6, -3 area, we're going to put output gain. So this is makeup gain, and you basically just turn this up to compensate for how much you turn this down. You could do it evenly as much as you turn it down, or you could do it with your own flavor. Me personally, I'm going to turn it up a little bit just until I feel like it's right. You'll notice that I cranked this, and now this has all been cranked too. Remember, all the snares and all the kicks and all the hi-hats are all basically the same volume around each other. But overall, they've all been enhanced upward. So all the softer stuff has been enhanced upward so you can hear it more. And the other one that got matched down with it is back with them too. Now let's play it back before compression and then after compression. Before. Much fatter sound. And then knee is just how sharp the compression kicks in, and then this is different ways to view the compression, and then Look ahead is it can look ahead a few milliseconds to apply that attack a little bit sooner to kind of have it a more dramatic compression effect or even a more severe kind of cut into that volume. I'll put this back at 0. And then this is how much you apply on top of it. This is full compression. And then like if you want it to be like a 50-50 of like the compressed sound and the original sound, you could just do that like this. You know what? I think I'm happy with the 50-50. It's a little bit of control on the kick, but it doesn't lose all the kick. It just controls it so it's not so obnoxiously loud compared to everything else. And the rest of it's been enhanced because of the output gain, so I'm cool with it. Maybe 60. Yeah, I'm happy with 60. That's cool. Last thing we're going to do now is we're going to put this utility at the very end of the track before the wave observer, of course. And you'll notice that this utility has a few little tools in it, including width, balance, and gain. We'll go over some of these later, but for now, we're just going to use the width. It'll add wideness to the sound and it'll kind of space everything out. So like the sounds that are all kind of narrow, we'll kind of space out a little bit so you can hear more clearly in the left and right channels. Make everything sound a little bit more 3D. It'll give a little more clarity to everything because they're not right on top of each other. And then if I wanted to make it more mono or just basically like everything into one singular channel of sound and all dead center, basically, you would turn it down this way. But let's crank it up a little bit and widen it up. So you can already hear everything being a bit more clear and a bit more wider in the mix. I'm going to turn that down a little bit, but overall, I do like having them spaced out just a tiny bit. All right, now that I've done that, one tiny last thing. The hi-hat, I'm going to turn it down a little bit. For me, I want it down just a little bit. Sometimes you want it to be in your face. Other times you want it to be more supplementary. I want it to be more supplementary. Cool. And that cymbal, I want it to be just a little bit to the left. And a little bit down. Now that it's clear because it's in its own little area of the left and right spectrum, it's also going to be a little bit louder, so let's turn it down to compensate. Cool. I got my drums. Next, let's go ahead and work on the 808. Right off the jump, I'm going to create 2 sections for this song. We're going to just copy the kick pattern from the drums. And then I'm just going to plan out each note real quick. Okay, so then at this last part, I wanted to add just a little extra rhythm right here just to kind of build it up before the loop starts all over again. So let's see how my 808 rhythm sounds real quick. Let's go ahead and beef up the 808 real quick. Let's see, let's select all, hit legato. Feeding the 808 through a little bit of a send reverb here real quick. Let's change this one. I like this one a lot better, so I'm gonna put this on the track and then cut this one. All right, let's see how it sounds through this. Then I'm probably gonna add like a light distortion effect to it. One thing you'll often hear in some 808s when it comes to trap music is adding like a distortion effect on top of it. Give it that really highly digitally distorted sound. We only want a tiny, tiny, tiny little bit of that. So let's see what I can do with this. Okay, we'll just slowly introduce it with this here. Wow, even that tiny little bit adds that kind of character to it. Let's see how they sound together. One thing I need to do real quick, this kick here and then the 808. I could do a technique called sidechaining where I would have the kick cut out the 808, but I'm going to save that technique for a different part of this song. So instead, I'm going to do a very super duper basic thing that simulates kind of what sidechaining would ultimately do. Basically, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have just the peak of the kick stand out on its own, and then I'm going to have the 808 come in like half a split second after that kick so that you hear the 808. So you hear just the kick of the drum, and then like right about half a split second later, you'll hear the 808 trail out beneath it. So it all kind of sounds like one big sound. So let's go ahead and tweak that real quick. Let's see how they sound together now. See here? You see it before how they kind of punch over each other if I don't have this fade in, but if I had to fade in just a little bit, then you can hear the kick and then this fades in right after it. Go ahead and turn this down a little bit. Let's see how loud my 808s are real quick. Yeah, it's peaking at like 159. Yeah, that's crazy high already. Let's turn that down. Instead of turning down the volume here, I'm gonna turn it down with the gain real quick. So super basic. You're gonna hear two terms that talk about the loudness of a sound: volume and gain, and they're two very different things. Everyone thinks of volume because that's what we've grown up with as far as like, you know, listening to all of our audio devices and TVs and things like that. But this is not always the most important thing about the fullness of a sound. Gain usually is. So gain is basically the fullness of the sound itself, like the complete fullness and presence to that sound. And then volume in this context, at least in Ableton and in mixing, is how much we're allowing ourselves to hear that sound. So this is the fullness of the sound, and then this is how much we're allowing ourselves to hear that sound being played through. We can hear it just a little bit, or we can hear it a lot. But this is not changing the fullness of the sound, the inherent power of the sound underneath. It's just allowing us to hear a little bit or a lot of it. Instead of me just turning this down, which is just turning down how much I'm allowed to hear it, I'm going to turn down the actual power of the sound itself, because this is ultimately the thing that's going to bleed into the rest of the mix and is the thing that we're going to have to be mindful of later on. Look at that. Right off the jump, let's hear before and then after. That's not just me just turning down how much I'm hearing it, that's turning down its intensity. And I just want to turn it down a little bit, but it definitely helps clear out a lot of that extra buzziness. And then now let's see how loud this is peaking. Peaking closer to 4. All right, yeah. You'll notice I'm paying attention to these little numbers here. They will come into play a bit throughout the mixing process. And then when we get to mastering, the very last step, they're going to be a big feature. So just keep in mind out for if your track, whatever you're playing, any instrument whatsoever, if any of it's going past 0 dB, it's too hot, too distorted, and you're going to want to correct it down below that. Now, just for this section, all we're going to do is we're just going to beef up the 808 by adding a club synth behind it, doing the exact same melody. It's just going to make the 808 sound that much fatter and more epic. So, simple thing we're going to do, we're just going to copy these. It's the Arpeggio instrument that I'm going to make is going to have the same club synth, so I'll just use that. And then let's go ahead and pick an instrument real quick. So right now the Arpeggiator's on. Let's just turn that off real quick. Let's scroll through until I find something I like, and then I might tweak it a little bit. All right, now that I have this hook section figured out, let's go ahead and work on the verse 1 and 2. The verse will have an arpeggiator melody all throughout the back of it, and then the harp is going to play in at certain parts, and then the piano will come in to kind of highlight certain little transitions. So let's see. For this section, I'm not going to have a bunch of bass melodies. Instead, I'm going to have just a driving bass, just like one note repeated over and over and over. And then I'm just going to play like a bunch of C's in a row, and then a bunch of D's in a row, and then like a bunch of A's in a row. And they're going to act sort of as my chord progression. Let's highlight all the stuff I did here for these 2 parts. Now, this isn't a perfect major scale that I'm following. I'm just following most of it, and then I'm adding a little color off notes right here on this one singular note because I think it just sounds good. And then a tiny little bit of color up here. I'm having these tiny little like mini dips in the melody before I transition to another part of the melody, like a little bit of flair in between. Like I do a double timed build at the end. Instead of it being this long, it's only half as long, and then I transition more and more. So the fact that I'm transitioning between new chords faster gives it much more of like a kind of rush, immediate kind of rising back to this big crescendo up here. And this one is just a little off, but it's intentional, just gives a little bit of color. And when it transitions into the B, it'll actually sound good in context. So now for this part, I'm going to create an arpeggio for this section here. I could use the arpeggio tool as I demonstrated earlier, but I actually kind of want to just draw in the notes myself. And let me just go ahead and load my user preset. You're able to tweak things and then save it as your own custom preset and then rename it. So I retitled it as the name of the song for which it's being used. Let's just see how that sounds real quick. All right, cool. I'll tweak down the reverb just a little bit more, and then I think it's exactly where I want it to be. Let's see, mix 40. All right, cool. One thing I noticed that when I went back to my old project file, I paired it with a second arpeggio on top of it to give these notes a bit more pop and clarity. So I'm going to recreate that right now. And we're going to go ahead and just Control D this track. Now I have another duplicate of the arpeggios here. We're going to retitle this. We're going to just rename this hook synth arpeggio 1, arpeggio 2. And then this one is just going to have the stock almighty synth from the hype. Now for this one here, I'm going to also use the hype synth. Okay, noisy pluck. Okay, let's see how this sounds on its own real quick. And then let's add that on top of this as well. I'm going to experiment with the levels on these until I get a nice blend on top of all this. Let's just try this real quick. Yeah, I think I like this in an octave lower. All right, cool. I like the overall sound. When I get to the mixing stage of the track, you'll see me balance these out a little bit more. And then one more thing I'm going to do for this section about verse part 1 is originally in the old song, I just had this looping over and over and over and over again. But for this version, I kind of want to change this up a little bit every so often just to keep the melodic variety going. So in my head, it's kind of like a B minor, A major, G major, E minor. I think that's essentially the chord progression I'm hearing in my head. I see these notes. I'm going to play them out on my keyboard real quick and just see how they sound as a whole chord and just kind of like do a more traditional method. I think I'm just going to play some chords on my keyboard. And then if I like the chord progression, I will turn those chords into arpeggios. So let's see. The first chord is whatever this is. Let's just play these out and see whatever shape that makes. Let's see. Let's go ahead and turn off the scale thing real quick. Let me go ahead and load up my piano real quick. Here, sorry. Let me copy this real quick. B. Interesting. I have never played these notes as a chord before, and it has a very interesting, gloomy kind of sound to it. It's actually kind of a weird hand shape too. Kind of crams 2 fingers together. These two. Let's press a B with it. I guess a A major would work. Okay. So this is a B minor with an extra C sharp added in for color. So let's do an A major with an extra note for color. Let's try like a, I don't know, like a, I'm just going to play around. Oh, that's nice. Kind of like this extra high note. Adds a nice little sparkle. So we're going to move from this to this. And then I guess the next chord's definitely going to be like a G major something. Let's add something else to give it a little more character. Nice little gloom. I might keep this. Oh, okay. Okay. Ooh, okay. This is an E minor with an extra little D on top. It's going to resolve with like a... There we go, okay. This intro is kind of reminding me of the old soap opera, The Young and the Restless. There was like this dramatic, inspirational, like symphonic music in the beginning that just sounded like a romantic novel come to life. I don't know, just reminds me of that. Okay. All right, I think I have a chord progression to create my arpeggio with. Please hold. And then now I got this. Now I'm going to create this section of the song. So what I'm going to do here is now I'm going to add my harp. Normally I would just slap Flavor Pro on this and be done with it, but I have enough going on in the background as it is with all the synths, so this just needs a little bit of character, but it needs to maintain its overall clarity. Let's just color it up a little bit, delay. Let's just play around with this a little bit. I'm gonna create a little basic melody. If you sync them, that means that whatever kind of repeat you have on one side will have the same repeat on the other. If you don't sync them, then you can change the parameters for each one individually. All right, I like where this is going. I think that's good. There is a certain melody I played over it, so let me just try to mentally recreate that real quick. Please hold. And then now I'm gonna just add some arpeggios here. If I haven't already created a progression to match the chords I have here or the notes I have here, then I will create a new chord. I have one for G, I have one for A, E, F sharp, G. That's my B. That's my A. That's my G. Yes. And then that's my E. Yeah. And then E and F sharp. And I was able to go through them by just pressing tab. So I have my G, copy, G here. And then I have my A, copy. And then I have my... If you want to copy just part of a clip instead of the whole thing, just highlight the part you want to copy and then press Control C. And then you can just click where you want to paste it and Control V, and you only have to copy that portion. Cool. And then I'll do the same thing with just one sliver here, and then I'll add one sliver there. And then I'm going to duplicate this, but I'm going to ever so slightly tweak this up to an A sharp and hope that it works out. A sharp. Cool, this works out. Okay, I'm gonna highlight all this and then holding shift and pressing up. And now it's at a higher octave. Let's see how this all sounds together real quick. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I got the goosebumps. Even that little bump added some clarity to the harp. There's some low end here that it's not needed. Let's just cut that out. I'm gonna turn that down a little bit. It's just a little bit loud. All right, one more thing. I'm gonna add some piano splashes here in this little section just to make this uprise part a bit more dramatic, and then I'll go back into the verse. And then I'll have the main two parts of my song figured out. And from there, I'll just give you a tiny little clip montage of me expanding out the song into a bigger arrangement. Right here, I hear a piano splash. This is exactly where I want to introduce a piano. I'm gonna draw that out real quick. And then you'll notice that they're all perfectly going to start like right here. But if I want to like splash it and create like a nice plucked out effect where each note is slowly being played over like half a second, what you can do is you can highlight all these notes and then go to down here in this section here. You change this to strum, and then this simulates you playing something like you're strumming it out. When you strum something, you're not hitting every single note at exactly at the same time. You're hitting them kind of like 1 second or like 1 split second before the next. And if you do it slowly enough, it kind of creates like a that little, and you can simulate that here by strumming this out. So you see this, I can stretch it out a little bit. So now instead of it all perfectly playing on that one bar, it will like strum out a tiny little bit. Let's solo this. If I don't do that, it'll play like this. All on the same note. Let's say I didn't want to fiddle with the tool, or I already had an idea exactly how I wanted to strum out. Here's what I would do. I would let's see. I want it to like, let me just time this in real quick. It'd be like a, okay. For me, I want it to hit a split second before, then this middle one, then a split second after, and then this one can like share the one after. So let's see how that sounds. Too slow. Right click. I'm gonna try this on higher octaves just to see if I can hear it a bit better. Okay, so the good news is I figured out my piano. The bad news is that I love this piano preset, but it's just a little too gloomy for this particular arrangement. I kind of want the piano to be a little bit more clear, a little bit more bright. The piano sounded a little dry. I wanted to have some sustain real quick, so I'm going to double click this. I'm going to go to envelopes. So you had notes and you have envelopes. Go down to mixer, go to MIDI control, and then under MIDI control, go to the MIDI protocol number 64 for sustain. And then after that, we're going to turn the sustain all the way up because I just like that effect. And now the notes will ring out. All right, second thing I'm going to do here is these single note bass hits here. I'm going to save that for the second verse. And the first verse, I'm going to do more of a rhythmic kick, kind of a bass rhythm. So let's fix that up real quick. The kicks from here, apply them here. Cool, so I redid the whole verse section, but with a more rhythmic kind of pump for the 808. Okay, now that I have all my sounds the way I like them, the last thing I'm going to do for this section of the video is I'm going to teach you sidechain compression. Basically, sidechain compression is when you have one sound cut into the volume of another sound. And in this instance, instead of using it typically the way we would with a drum kicking into an 808, instead we're going to have the drum kick into the synth walls. So you'll hear kind of a pumping effect, and I'll explain how you can set that up now. So first, what we need to do is decide which instrument's going to cut into which instrument. So again, we're going to have the drums cut into the synths. So every time the kick plays, it'll cut back the volume of the synths. And then when the kick stops, the volume of the synths will return back to normal, just like how we demonstrated with compression and the attack with the drum kit itself. So let's go ahead and set that up real quick. So we're going to go ahead and put a compressor on the synth wall here, the first one. And then you'll see this is just like before, but this time we're going to use this set of options here. So now we have to find the source of what sound is going to cut into this sound. And as you can see here, we can take a view of all of our instruments in this project. We're going to go to drum rack. And then from here, you can get very specific. You can either have the entire drum rack kick into the synth wall, or you can actually choose specifically what specific drum from that drum rack. And then furthermore, you can actually choose what stage you want that drum to kick in. So for example, if I wanted the kick to hit pre-effects, post-effects, or post-mixer, but I prefer to just kick in with all the effects on the kick all at once. Here we go. Now we're just going to test this out real quick. So I'm going to solo this track. And basically, if I set it up correctly, you'll see that the waveforms of the synth will continue to play, but you'll see the occasional dip whenever the kick kicks in. Perfect. Worked exactly as intended. And as you can see that clear pumping effect, again, we can set how deep and how hard that kick cuts into the volume with these parameters here. Ratio, attack, and release. I'm going to just turn down the attack. I think that's going to be all that I need, but let's experiment. Maybe a little less than half. But as you can see that pumping effect, that's how you make a sidechain compression work. The effect works. I'm just curious how it sounds blended. Huh, that's actually pretty cool. I'm going to turn down the effect a little bit more, but it is pretty close to what I'm looking for. The only thing we need to do for both of these is turn down the output gain. When I did the compression, it actually boosted the volume quite a bit, which is not the end of the world. I just have to compensate. So both of these are at 6.2. Let's just crank them down back to like maybe 3. All right, yeah, so having this compressor here for the sidechaining, I was able to play with the threshold a little bit, and that kick effect, I lessened it down enough to where it's no longer drowning out the synth, but it's just there enough to give the kick a little extra presence above the synth. So you'll see here, that kick was going crazy deep into the volume, and now it's just having a little bit of pops here and there, which is all I want. I just wanted to kick this down a little bit more. Definitely helps the kick cut through the mix, especially in such a busy part. Now keep in mind, I know that I'm clipping, and that's okay. We're going to fix that in mixing. In this stage, I just want you to focus on the composition. We can clean up all the audio channels after. Okay, that's good. Yeah. Okay, so I have my main sections figured out. At this point, normally what we would do next is we would fill out the rest of the arrangement, but I'm going to spare you all that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip ahead, and we're going to go to now mixing and mastering. So now we will move on to mixing, and basically mixing, you're just trying to balance the audio levels between each instrument, and you're only trying to achieve 2 things. One, you're trying to make sure that every instrument sounds good in relation to each other, that nothing's drowning each other out, and that the right instruments have the right emphasis compared to everything else. And then 2, you're going to try to make sure that all your collective volume doesn't exceed a certain threshold on the output here. So you see this is your main output, and you basically want to make sure that you mix all your music to where it never go past 0 dB. Typically, you're going to try to aim for somewhere between -6 and -3. The reason why is that you want that extra space and volume to be there so that when you master your song, which is the final step after this, you can apply mastering effects to bump up your music from -6 or whatever up to as close to 0 as possible without going over. But that little bit here, you can add enough effects to really beef up your sound and to really add a lot more dimension to it. And that is usually the difference between stuff that sounds like a demo and stuff that sounds professional, or at the very least, a lot more confident than just a rough demo. We will divulge more into that as we get there, but for now, let's focus on mixing. So let's start mixing our track. Now, what I'm about to do is essentially kind of combine common advice that I've seen all over YouTube and forums, and then kind of merge that with things that I've learned from my own experience. First thing, drum rack. You see this little drop down arrow? That actually expands all the sounds in your drum rack into their own separate mixing channel. And if you click on that, you can actually see just the effects or just the sounds applied to those specific channels. The next thing is that the very first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the volume level for the kick. The common advice is if you can get the kick volume settled first and then build your drums and then bass and then other instruments around that kick as the anchor, you can get all your volumes pretty decently leveled. Let's just see how that works out for us. We're going to do an alternate save of my file here. And we're going to call this Easy Money Remake Stage 1. I always make a duplicate of my file in case one of them gets corrupted. And I forgot to add one more note. Typically, you would do this for the loudest section of the song. If you can get the audio levels of the loudest section of your song evened out, then everything else, comparatively speaking, should be a piece of cake. Let's see. We're already going to be mixing for this part where so much stuff is going on that this is going to be the last part of our song. So I think this is a good enough point for us to focus on. Now we're going to go ahead and just loop that. You'll notice right off the bat, these volume meters here, they're all capped by default at 0 dB. And this reader here tells you how high the volume has peaked. So playing, it peaks at 148. That's crazy high. By this on its own, this one sound on its own already bumps up my overall song volume to slightly above 6. And I still have to then fit in every other instrument and somehow get all those instruments together and still just be around 6. So I'm already way too high. So let's turn that down. Reset this. Now I'm peaking at like 771. The common advice is like get your kick around like 10 dB. As I explained earlier, this volume meter is not the same as the actual volume of the actual sound. It's just how much we're allowed to hear of that sound. But the actual inherent volume is the gain on this sound. So even though I turn it down -9, it's not gonna always be -9 because the fullness of the gain is gonna either be louder or softer than how much of this volume allows me to hear it. All right, so turn it down to 9. I peak at like 10.5 dB, which is good enough for the kick. Maybe I'll 948. Oh, I'll split the difference. 8.5. Just about 10. That's fine. Close enough. Just about 10-ish. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this is soloed. And then I'm going to hold Control and then press X on the snare. And then I can play them together and see how they sound comparable to each other. Let's turn that down. Loud enough to it, but not overpowering it and not too soft compared to it. We're still in the 5, right around the 6. I'm going to show you a little cheat in a minute that will allow you to kind of cheat your way into getting this into around the -6 dB range. I might even want to push it around -3. Depending on who you ask, typically they'll say around -6, but some people, especially in EDM, will say you can push it to -3. If I can get somewhere in between that, I'd be okay with that too. Compared to these two, this is still too high. You know, while we're here, let's do one more thing. Let's see. I actually like this in the context of the chord it's in. This actually sounds okay like that now. Okay, so let's see what the drums sound like relative to each other, and then let's see how much they spike here. Thankfully, yeah, even with all the drum sounds combined, they don't go over 5. That's good. I might have some room to work with. Again, if it goes overboard, I have a way to cheat the system. So let's see, now that I got my drums relatively mixed for now. Disclaimer, I probably should have turned off all the effects first and then mix the drum sounds on their own and then apply the effects afterwards, but whatever. Next, we have the 808. So let's just try to pair these together and see if I can get a good balance between them. Oh, key tip about 808 that even I was guilty of making quite often, and I might still be guilty of making today. Your natural first instinct is to make them as loud as possible. You don't want to do that. I know that obviously what I'm saying makes no sense. You're like, it's trap music. You want the bass to be heavy. Yes, that's true. You just don't need to crank them super high. A little bit of bass goes a long way, and it doesn't have to be that high in your volume for it to stand out. It just has to be full-bodied. As long as it has enough character and it's full-bodied, like it's a rich, warm sound, it'll sound full and fine, especially after the mastering stage. But you don't need to mix them super high compared to everything else. You don't need to feel worried that like everything's going to drown out the bass. Trust me, the bass will be there. As a matter of fact, it may sound subtle to you depending on what you're mixing with right now, like whatever headphones or speakers you're listening to. But I guarantee if you play whatever you think is not enough bass here on anything else, it's going to be too much bass. And then you have to come back and correct it. Yeah, this is crazy loud already. got a little problem. My bass stays relatively low, but then it sometimes peaks around like -1. I don't want it to be that loud. So right off the jump, what we're going to do is we're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to highlight both tracks with shift, hold shift and click both. And then you see how I got my volume kind of sectioned out. Like I got this at a 2 and I got this at a 5. I wanted to stay that same space, but lower them both down at the same time and keep the spacing. Then I can just drag this down. Let's do 3 and 6. Okay, and then we're going to try a little bit of how that sounds over here. And then another tip on how we can save some headroom between here and here. Let's go back to the 808 real quick, because the drums were leveled fine. They were at like a decent -5. But the 808, a bit loud. So here's what we're going to do with the 808. We're going to add our good friend Wave Observer to the 808. Then we're going to play the 808 real quick and just see if there's any like crazy spikes. Boom, right here. 0 dB, 6, 12. Let's see what our 808's kicking out on its own real quick. The 808, the 808s are spiking above 3. If I could clip those spikes, I can keep the character of the 808, but the 808 itself will stay below 3, and I won't have any occasional spikes dipping into like the 1s. And that's what it's measuring, is that sometimes it'll peak above like the regular volume, the average volume, and then it's gonna have these occasional peaks that are going into the red. And you can just shave off all the stuff that goes into the red and just keep it all nice and centered down here. So let's try that now. We're gonna use the clipper. Hard clip, I want it to be shaved off. No. Let's do soft clip. I kind of want to keep some of the character of those peaks. Let's see. Overdid it. Hold on. A tiny bit goes a long way. So let's hold shift. Just ever so slightly. Well, look at that. I've already shaved off some of the head right there. They're tamer. It's tamer. This is now getting closer to 3 on its own. Let's see what it sounds like here. Even the 808 on its own now is around like a 6. I'm curious to see what they sound like together, or how much volume that they'll hit together. At least the highs are consistent. They're no longer having these crazy peaks. It's just hovering around 235. So that gives me a little bit of hope. Let's just shave a little bit more and see what we can do from there. Oh yes, that's right. So I actually forgot a part that's a very important part of mixing, and a very important part of Ableton, I might add. So right here, you'll see we have our 808, and you see these little gain meters, or I should say volume meters, whatever you want to call them, in between each plugin right here, here, and here. So let's turn off everything else real quick, and you can see how they work in real time, and then this will actually allow us to clean up our 808 as well. So 2 birds, 1 stone. So this is the 808. We're going to play the 808 real quick. You'll notice that the 808 right now, on its own, averages around -10 dB. And that's represented like right here, this little orange range here. If I turn on this saturator, it increases the volume up to about 7.34 dB, -734 dB. But you'll notice I want it to stay down maybe around 10. So to do that, I need to compensate. I can turn down the dry, for example, or the dry wet, and get this volume back down to normal. So let's try that a little bit. I like the character a lot, so I'm not gonna change anything about the character. Instead, I'm just gonna turn down the amount you can hear on top of it. All right, now I got 80. And by doing that, I was able to get it back down to about -10 dB. Heck, I could even probably push a tiny bit more to get it back to where it was before. Now I'm at 10.5, okay. Okay, so now you can see there. So I'm at the same, I started this sound at this volume, and now this sound's gonna leave at this volume, which is comparable to this. Tiny bit warmer, but still below red. That's all we wanna make sure is just not hitting that little gray line and then clipping, or going past the -0 dB line and becoming distorted. So now, after we're at this level here, let's go ahead and turn on the EQ and see how that affects our sound from there. This, in and of itself, already added like 4 dB. So let's go ahead and turn that down by 4 dB, or roughly or so. Already back down to 10. Let's go ahead and just put it back on this part and see if this part triggers out some more volume out of it or not. All right, I'm getting 654 there. And then let's just try here. So these two sections trigger out two different volumes. Let's check something. All right, so these notes in this hook section are all at full velocity. They're at full impact. These notes down here are not at full impact. That explains the difference in volume. See, we learned something today, kids. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and highlight all these. We're gonna hover over one, hold Alt, and then just drag up on the mouse and drag them all to max velocity. Now we're working with their actual volume, or at the very least a comparable volume to the hook, and I don't have to do anything extra to fix the volume and automation or nothing like that. They're all at 127. All right, cool. So now they're all being hit with the same amount of impact and the same amount of intensity. So they all have the same full presence and volume that they're going to be triggered. So I don't have to worry about anything else now. So I'm averaging around like negative 650. I'm intentionally going to loop these two segments together since they're at the full same intensity now. All right. Curious how they sound together and how much volume they're both impacting. Around like -3. I don't want to hit -3 just yet because I still have other instruments to fit in. I'm getting closer, but still have to work on it a tiny bit. 8.5, good enough. Okay, let's take a look. That's the average volume coming out from this, and then I'm already damn near clipping with this, so let's go ahead and turn that down a little bit. Thankfully, even if you crank it up here, you can kind of correct it down here. It's just kind of like, you just want to try to overall at the end of the chain, keep everything below 0. And because after this, and then after 2 - 2 gain, it gets lower here. I'm okay with this. It's not clipping, so that's all that matters to me. And then after this is the real $1 million question. How much will it clip after I add the acid distortion? So you notice it's not clipping, which means I have a little bit more room to push this particular sound. So let's see how that works out for me. All right, never really goes above this. That's cool. I'm okay with this. Don't know if this has a limiter in it or not, but whatever I'm doing, it's not crossing. And then let's see what that sounds like together, these three. It's getting serious, y'all. Comparatively, it's way too loud already. Let's do the traditional method of just having this at 0, then fade it in until it sounds good. You know what? That snare, a little bit too high, just a little bit. There's two suggestions. They're both just my own personal suggestions. This may or may not work for you. Just something that works for me, maybe out of convenience, maybe out of simplicity. Who knows? A, you can go through each of these, get them all leveled and get them around 6. Or B, you can just mix them the way you want and make sure they never clip. And then when you're done at the end of it, you could just highlight all the instruments when you have your volumes the way you want them set as close to 0 as possible, and then just drag them all down until that average volume that it's hitting around here becomes around -6. So that's the cheat method. Let's see. I'm okay with that. I actually like this leveling. Sounds good. So let's see how it sounds with the rest of this other stuff. All right, so it's almost near 0, but you know what? Even here, this all sounds... I've tamed this down so much that this sounds a lot louder compared to it. So let's tame these down real quick. Let's add the arpeggio clearer notes here, and then last, add that wall sound. That wall sound's going to turn down quite a bit, but we'll see how it sounds together. Let me clean something up with this real quick. Go here real quick. All that low end we can just cut out here. So all right, and then we'll do that here. I might emphasize the high end just a tiny bit here while I'm at it too. Emphasizing the mid-range, it really brightens up the sound. A little bit above center mid-range here, then usually the song will stand out on regardless of whatever speaker, like a earpods or a car stereo or a laptop or whatever. Okay, way too loud. We're gonna slowly phase it back in. I noticed that because I turned down the sound of my kick, it's not having as much pump here, so I'm gonna tweak that a little bit. As one last little just kind of like test, if you will, I'm going to play through the whole arrangement for myself real quick and just see if me changing the audio levels change anything drastic about the flow. And if it sounds good, then we'll go. And if not, I'll tweak a little bit more and then we'll continue. All right, so I went through the song and then I realized it's just getting these two back to equal parity, if you will. That's really the only thing I got to focus on. So let's do that real quick. All right, so they're at levels I like, and then you'll see here that I'm like right on the cusp of 0. But I want you to notice something here. You see the green, and then you see like the orange, and then you see like the hovering red. Like the song mostly peaks around -6 actually. Like the real overall average volume is around 6. Then occasionally it bumps up around like -3, -2, -1. Like there's occasional spikes here and there that bump it past that part, and I'm gonna just, in the mastering stage, I will compensate for those spikes using a couple of tricks. So, yeah, you'll see here, averaging around 6. And then those notes themselves bump it up sometimes. But you see how it's like averaging around -6. It's hitting the occasional peak, but it's averaging around -6. So I think I did a good job actually centering these out by accident. Those occasional peaks I will correct in the mastering stage. Okay, there's the occasional notes that pop this up. I think there's moments where 3 things are all hitting the exact same note at the exact same time, and that collective increase in volume gives it a temporary pop above a certain point. So let me try this too. Yeah, I'm noticing that I'm just, all things said and done outside certain melodic elements, it like averages around -3. So one last thing we can do, and then we'll get to the mastering stage, is let's go to the mastering track, which is called main now for whatever reason. And then let's go ahead and just put in our best friend, Wave Observer. And then here, let's just take a look at some occasional spikes and peaks real quick. A piano splash causes one of the spikes. I'm just going to fix that real quick. Very, 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 very simply. All I'm going to do is this part spikes up a little bit. I'm just going to turn down the velocity for this chord here. Okay, that should clean that up a little bit here. And then I'm not going to overthink it because at this point, it's like I could tweak and nitpick all day long. But ultimately, my main volume I feel is around like -6 and -3. So that's good enough for me. That's my basic and admittedly flawed mixing lesson here. We're going to clear this here. And then now we're going to get to mastering. Mastering, thankfully, is easy to get into, but very difficult to master. No pun intended. Basically, once you're done arranging your song, finding your instrument sounds, and then mixing your song, mastering is the last step. And mastering is taking a song and then giving it typically to a master engineer who will then add some final effects, some compression, some other things to beef up the song and to get it to its full maximum loudness. And then once they're done with that process, it will be ready for release. It'll be loud and big and ready for consumption. In this day and age, people can dip their toes into mastering themselves. I will show you a very basic mastering chain. I have different mastering chains that I've experimented with for different songs, and not every single song will be mastered the same way, but there's some basic fundamentals that we can cover now. So let's go ahead and just minimize all this real quick. And then master stage 1. I always like to save my projects in stages in case I need to go back and change something, then I don't lose a ton of progress on top of other things or lose track of where certain things were. This is all my main instruments up here. And then this is my send reverb here. The main is your master track. Here's our master track. This is just a little thing I added. It's a Max for Live device, a freebie as a default for all of my projects, just to see how long I've been working on a project. I'm gonna cut this real quick. Okay, we will start this master chain from scratch. Now, all these sounds are gonna get fed into the master track. And the very first thing I'm gonna put on a mastering track is a Saturator. You'll notice how I applied that to the 808 and it really beefed up and warmed up the sound. I'm going to do that for overall for every single sound and every single instrument in the song, but just a tiny bit, just to add a little bit of color overall. So everything sounds a little bit warmer and a little less like cold and synthy. We're just gonna play the song a little bit and then I'm just gonna turn up a little bit. And don't worry that we're almost clipping. I'll be able to take care of that in a second. Way too much. Let's start with 0. Let's do it maybe up to 1. A little goes a long way with the saturator. It already sounds a lot fuller just from that little 1%. First part of the mastering chain, saturator. Next thing. And I guarantee you there's probably an optimal way in a specific order that you should put these effects, but this again is just what works for me. EQ. Now that I've done that, for the entirety of the song, I'm going to cut out everything below 30 hertz. Apparently, and what I'm told is that you can just cut out the extra mud in the very, very low end and still keep the overall bass character. So we'll do that now. Boom, boom. All right, that makes it more precise. Oh, I see. Yeah, I could have just dialed it up here. 30.1 is fine. And then next, just to give everything else a little bit more clarity, I'm going to boost the mids and the high mids just a little bit, and then everything's going to sound a little bit clearer and a little bit brighter. All right, sounding better as it is. Then after that, we can add a utility. Now that I've added warmth to the song to give it a little bit of fullness and a little bit more color and character, and now that I've tweaked the EQ to cut out the super low end buildup and to brighten the mids just a tiny bit, next we will put the utility. There's two things we could do with utility here. So one, width, of course, we'll add a bit more of a 3D effect and a bit more dimension and space. Interesting. When I open the width, it makes this background synth stand out a little bit more. So I'm going to turn that down just a tiny bit because with the width, it stands out a little bit more than I'd like. So let's go ahead and do that. And then that's a negative 13. You are now a negative 14. Okay. Now we have a saturator for warmth, an EQ for brightness and clarity, and the width to kind of give everything a little bit more space. There's another thing we do, the utility. So this bass mono option here, if I turn it on, every single sound below 120 hertz, everything sound below in this lower end of all of my sounds will be turned into a mono channel. So instead of being stereo where it's going to have a sound equally on the left and equally on the right, or at least some combination of both ears, the bass mono will take all the bass, everything below that frequency range, everything below 120 hertz in all of your sounds, and put them all dead center and just make it one single channel in the dead center. And this can be helpful because since bass takes up so much background space, it could really focus all your bass and just keep it all in one center area, and everything else can have its own space around that to shine. And it just cleans up all your low end. You know, honestly, that's, I think I might keep the bass mono. It's a subtle effect, but I can hear it in my headphones where there's like a little bit of warmth from the left and a little bit of warmth from the right, and they're just completely cut out, and all I can hear is like the dead center, like bass fullness in the center, and that's okay with me because it gives everything a little bit more room to shine. Now that I got that going, the next thing I'm going to do is, let's see, warmth, clarity, wideness, and a little bit more focus. There's many debates on what I could or should do next, but I want to keep my mastering chain, especially for this example, simple. So I think the only thing I'm going to do next is add a compressor here. And instead of adding the original compressor that we used a couple of times in this lesson, I'm going to use a glue compressor. Here we go. So remember how it tied all of our drums together? It's going to do the same thing for all of our instruments. So let's turn this off, and then we're going to turn it back on, and then we're going to tune it to taste. Same principle. You can change the threshold. It's a little bit more analog looking, but it's the same concept. You lower how low you want your threshold to be, and then anything above that, it gets compensated by a certain ratio. It cuts in based on the attack, and it fades back to normal based on the release. And then how much this is applied overall, whether it's a blend or just dry or wet on its own. Clipper, we've touched upon that a little bit. Frankly, I don't even know what range does. Whatever. And then makeup, of course, makes up the gain you've lost by turning down the overall perceived volume. So let's see what we do now. And keep in mind, if I start clipping here, I'm going to quote unquote fix in the next step here. So now I have my glue compressor. Let's see what it sounds like without and then with. Let's lower the threshold by like, let's just say like a -4. So my overall sounds are barely kicking in based on the ratio. So let's turn down that ratio and see how much more drastic it sounds. Really fattens down the sound. Let's turn that down a little bit. I have the occasional spike that clips. Most of it stays right underneath, but an occasional spike that clips, but it's fine. Because now we're going to add the last two pieces of the puzzle. First piece, our best friend. Say it with me now. Wave, observer, for the win. Okay, so we're going to just see what my song looks like, see what the waveforms look like. And then I'm going to add the last effect for this mastering chain. Let's see. Ah, right off the top, there's a couple of percussive spikes. Okay, this helped me visualize some stuff. So, first thing, my snare. My snare is just a little bit too high. Let's clip the snare real quick. All right, let's see. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go ahead and add a clipper to the snare on its own. Then we're gonna go ahead and solo the snare. Look at those sharp, sharp peaks. So let's go ahead and clip. Too drastic, but you see what I'm going for here. This is around the spot it starts to take a noticeable effect. Let's just trim it down like halfway and see if that's good enough to just lower it down a bit. All right. Yeah. That's cool. All right, now it's not spiking as hard. And then second, I noticed that the wood perk was doing the same thing. Oh my goodness. Look how drastic that is. It keeps most of the character, but cuts down the peaks significantly. Look how drastic that changes. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and I'll lighten up a little bit, but it definitely improves it quite a bit. Well, look at that. I was able to save my song from clipping by changing those two peaks. Just the peaks in those two drum sounds were causing those occasional spikes, and trimming those two down kept me below 0. I didn't necessarily have to do all that, especially considering what the next step is about to be, but I'm okay with it. Now that I've tweaked those sounds and it's like just barely underneath clipping, now the last effect in our mastering chain will be, drum roll please, limiter. Wow, I cannot spell. There you go. That's how you spell limiter. Now I have a few, but I'm going to choose the stock one from Ableton. And let's just put this here. Now I have a limiter. And a limiter is basically a device that works closer to a compressor where if music goes past a certain threshold, it just presses it back down to that threshold. But it's not really doing like the ratio element thing where it's like for every 3 dB, you only get to hear 1. No. It just basically says you go past a certain amount, we're gonna push it back down a certain amount to that threshold, even Steven. And the advantage of a limiter is that 1, it comes with a soft clipper in case you want that option. 2, comes with look ahead so you can kind of apply the effect a little bit sooner and give it more of a clearly controlled, smoother effect. You just have to set the threshold. So you see this little blue arrow here, that's your threshold, right? And it's defaulted to negative 0.3 dB. Now what's gonna happen is any sound that goes past negative 0.3 dB above here will just get pressed back down. And as much as it goes up here, it's going to get gain reduced, and you'll see how much is being gain reduced down here. So let's say I go over 2 dB, it's showing me that it's going to press back my music down by 2 dB. Now you're thinking, what's the point? If it's just going to cap your music at a certain volume, then does it really do anything? Yeah, it does. Because in the same way that we increase the gain of our lower sounds in the compressor, it'll do the same thing. Like you could have all the high peaks go past here, and then all the subtle stuff down here is going to also be pressed up as you press everything else up. And then the overall low ambience and the low volume of the song will get warmed up and enhanced to where you're going to start hearing everything louder and louder and louder. And this gives you a lot of room to kind of like press everything up, but not have it sound crazy distorted, at least not early on, and just kind of get everything to as max volume as you could possibly get it before you start making it distorted. It basically lets you cheat past 0. It's just going to press up, 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 and up, and it's going to give you a lot of room to do that before you start having to pay for it. So that's why I said this is going to basically take care of everything. I will admit I'm using this in a very basic way. For me as a beginner, it's basically like, cool, my music can sound louder and I'm not going to inherently clip as a result. And then the last piece of advice I can give is that it's just obviously you have to use good judgment. Push it as far as you can without making it clip or sound crazy distorted, or even distorted at all if you can. And you just have to know when to stop. So I'm just going to turn up the input, and then we'll push it a little bit and a little bit and a little bit, and you'll see how much I'm going to get gain reduced. As I go 2 up, it's going to go 2 down. And then after that, we're essentially done with our mastering of the track. And you'll be able to see the difference with the limiter in the wave observer as well. So watch this. With this limiter, you're going to see something very interesting. You'll see the song and have its normal spikes and its ups and downs with the waveforms, right? And then you'll notice that it's all going to be hovering around 0. And then I'm going to turn up this input, and eventually you're going to see the whole song fatten out to about 0. But if I've done this right, you'll never see it actually go over 0. The song will get fatter and constantly push against 0, but it'll never go over 0, as long as I'm doing it tastefully. So you notice how fat that song got, and then watch this. We'll play it again, and you'll see that it's never gonna go past 0.3 dB. So now we're gonna go ahead and play this before any of these effects, and then we're gonna play this with the effects turned on. And I might turn them on just one at a time, and then we'll do an A and B test dry and with the effects. Playing this dry. I have to admit, I don't need that much on the limiter, to be honest. I mean, I already maxed out pretty damn high even before, so let me just tweak some of this. I want it to be just a little bit clearer. Yeah, this sounds a bit more transparent. Yeah, before it was a bit too pumpy. This one sounds pretty representative, just a little bit warmer and a little bit louder. Okay, that was essentially a basic mastering chain. Taking all your main sounds, you're feeding them into a master track, and then you're applying certain effects in certain stages to enhance the overall song. Now that we've covered that, the very last thing I'll do is just gonna be a very quick supercut of me expanding out this chunk of music into a full song. And then after that, I will play the full song and have some parting words of wisdom and some extra tips for you to take with you in your music production journey forward. Thank you for staying this long. We're near the end. We'll wrap up soon. Expand out the song into some different sections. Intro. It's going to be the hook again here. but it's going to have an extra instrument here in my head the way I see it. Like this is like an uprising part, so that's why I'm going to enable this section. And then there's going to be like a stomp section, like a it's like the song like kind of collapses in on itself, and then like I slowly rebuild in this section here. Now I just got to figure out some of the parts. I've used this before. I like this one. I might use it again. That little echo on that sound covers up the transition. It gives a few seconds of the background being filled in before the background gets filled in from the synth. So I'd like that as a good coverage between the hook and the verse. Right here, do a really quick fade out, like right there. There we go. Okay, it just has a little bit more of a fade. The more I've been listening back on it, the more I realize I don't want this doubled up melody right here with the harp. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete these real quick. The harp and the piano play and they kind of face each other out. And it's kind of cool, but it's a little bit much. So I'm just going to have one or the other. I'm kind of hearing notes in my head. There's one thing I want to do here. It's like a simulated strum where I just do 3 notes real quick and they like roll right into each other. Now I want it to be a bit closer. I'm going to start this section with like a piano splash, and I'm going to have the piano kind of be more dominant in this section. And then I'm going to have them kind of strum out a little bit. In my head, I have like a little piano figure that's like. Just gonna make a triplet breakdown here. This section here, I wanted, like, there's a melody in my head, but I wanted to play it out with chords. So I just did the melody first and then figured out the chords underneath that would correspond. All right, I have this little rhythm here. Let's merge them all together. I pieced together a progression for the first half of verse 2, and then the second one, I basically just added a couple of splash chords here to just match the chord changes. And in this part, I just did the same thing from here, except I just shifted it all up 1 octave to make it much brighter and more epic and cheesier, but I like it cheesy. And then I added back some of these notes here on this top part just to play together with the harp, but it's no longer overclashing because they're in 2 different octaves, so it sounds good now. And then next, I basically am going to build this out by the bass first, because once I get the bass, which is essentially the chord progression for the song, then everything else I can just match on top. Sound like Doogie Howser over here. It's going to be very Coldplay-esque melody here. Now just gotta do a little stomp. But then after that, the rest of the song's on autopilot, because hook 3 is essentially gonna be a repeat of hook 1 with just extra stuff on top. Honestly, that's really all it's gonna do is just beef it up. And then the outro is literally just gonna be the verse 1 and 2 just faded out with a couple of extra little chimey notes on top at the end. That's about it. I'm not gonna do anything crazy here. How does this go again? You know what? To build into it, I gotta do some I gotta build in some kicks just so like it like immediately pumps into it, so it doesn't sound like it's just coming out of nowhere. All right, so I have just a tiny little pseudo drum fill here. and it like dramatically stops, and then it like builds, it has a tiny little fill, and then it goes into the rebuild section. I've turned off the sidechain compression for this section because I just want you to hear the walls without being cut or pumped, and then they will go back to being pumped through here. I will turn that back on over this section here. Okay. Oh yeah, I guess that means if I do that, I gotta correct the volume back too. Since the compressor's off, I had to turn down the volume, and then if I do that here, if the compressor's back on, the volume will go back to normal. And that here, that means that if I 508, then for here, I need this to be 508 also. 530 is close enough. Actually, I think that sounds fine on its own. I don't really think I need all that much else. Here, I think I'm just gonna take the easy way out and do this background on top of this in a higher octave, and then I'll just freestyle some notes here, and this will be done for me personally. Paste, and then I'm going to highlight both and select all, and then all right, cool. Real quick, easy way to fade out the entire track is to go to main, and then you can just turn down the volume fader on the main itself. So here we go. Right click, show in automation, and then right here I want it to fade out after the first repeat of this outro, and then it's going to fade to 0 like that. So done. So the song, once it gets to this point, will just fade out to 0. Last thing, I'm going to just create a little piano melody and a little bit of extra wall, and I think I'm done. So I added a high note. This built up to a higher octave for the last note, and then just to match it, I went a tiny bit higher for the next octave here to finish the melody, but in a higher octave. So it has a sustained note on top, coloring the whole thing, and then I have the notes in a higher octave as well, just doubling up the main hook. All right, I think I actually finished. All right, light at the end of the tunnel. That was an afternoon, but yeah, I'm happy. So I'm gonna just play the entire song. While the song is playing, I'm gonna give you some final tips to help you along your music production journey and some final words of wisdom. If you are even watching this, thank you. I know it's a lot. If you even skip to the end, thank you, because I never thought anyone would see this anyway. And other than that, I'm happy to have even had the opportunity to do all this. I would have loved something similar of a guide when I first started, but I'm just paying it forward. So I'm going to play the song and then some final words, and then we'll be good. All right, take care.